On a gray evening, a trial is taking place. A beautiful woman with black hair named Veronica Hillsteel is declared guilty of the crime of treason. Her sentence? Death! Murmurs echo through the room as the sentence is announced. Ignoring them, the judge looks at Veronica and asks for her last words. Tearfully, she responds with a question. Is loving a sin now? Is it a sin to love the prince? The murmurs in the room turn into outraged remarks after hearing that. Even at the end, she's still shameless. I heard the count is in shock that his only daughter turned out like this. After hearing such nonsense, the judge orders Veronica to be taken away. Before being dragged out, she looks at the prince with tears in her eyes and wishes him happiness. The prince, who had been watching everything from a distance, just looks at her uncomfortably without saying a word. The guards grab her by the arms and escort her out. As she passes through the doors of the courtroom, we see Veronica's expression change. From an innocent, tearful look to a confident and cunning gaze. She is thrown into the prisoner carriage, where someone is waiting for her. Confidently, she fixes her hair and asks the gray-haired man if her performance was satisfactory. The man answers seriously that the performance was perfect. She extends her hand toward the man, waiting for her payment and saying, "Then I guess with that my contract is over, isn't it, Daddy? Or rather, Count." It is at this moment we discover that this woman is our protagonist. But she is not Veronica because Veronica doesn't even exist. Her real name is Lacey, a woman born into an extremely poor family, not even knowing who her father was, living in misery with only her mother. At the age of 10, to pay off her mother's debts, she was sold to a secret agency known as Fiore. Despite being extremely beautiful, Lacey begged the agency's owner to give her a job where her beauty wasn't the only thing that mattered. And so Lacey became an actress. But her stage was the streets. Life itself, after all. It was an agency of con artists. A passerby who witnesses a crime, a bastard daughter of a newlywed nobleman, a marquis's maid. It didn't matter the role. She had to give her best. And Lacey was damn good at what she did. One of the best in her agency, she played her roles flawlessly for years. Then one day, a highly unusual job proposal appeared. No revenge, no scams. The request was to play the adopted daughter of a count. For years. Though strange, the offer was extremely tempting, since the amount to be paid was enough for Lacey to retire from acting and finally be free. To be herself and stop pretending to be someone else for her client's gain. An opportunity like that doesn't come around every day, and Lacey knew it. So she accepted the role. For 6 years, Lacey became Veronica, the daughter of Count Hillsteel. Her role was clear. Help the first prince become the best candidate for the throne. Ensure that the noble lady chosen by the count would become the prince's fiancée, and then disappear. As if Veronica had never existed. First, she had to be recognized by Weldon society as a noble lady pure and kind enough to catch the prince's attention, and also to help raise his moral standing with the public. Using the excuse of fragile health, Veronica had a late debut. But it was spectacular enough to impress everyone, especially the prince, who became enchanted by her. Everything was going according to plan. At the right time, the angelic lady chosen by the count entered the scene to compete for the prince's love and attention. And Veronica, out of jealousy, would try to poison her. Her plan would fail, and even though she was a count's daughter, she would be severely punished for endangering the prince's life out of blind jealousy. The perfect excuse for her to exit the stage while the real chosen one, now seen as unjustly wronged by the cruel Veronica, would marry the prince. Everything happened as planned. Or at least, that's what Lacey believed. But upon returning to the agency, she was informed by her boss that the count had betrayed her, and now she was a wanted criminal throughout the kingdom. In disbelief, holding her wanted poster, Lacey explains everything to her boss, saying there's no way she could have done anything wrong to justify the count's actions. As instructed, she had become the showcase that highlighted the prince's qualities. And when he was at his peak, she passed the role of consort to the woman chosen by the count and disappeared from everyone's sight and memory. Ta-da! A happy ending for everyone. Lacey says cheerfully, proud of her work. This way, the count would save his reputation through the prince's fiancée and have someone he chose himself by the prince's side, while I, with the pile of money I received, would pay off my debts and move to a place where no one knows Veronica exists and live the life of my dreams. Lacey snaps back to reality, furious. I worked like a damn slave for 6 years, did everything the count planned perfectly, and now I'm being hunted for 10,000? What the hell is that bastard count thinking? Calmly, while smoking a pipe, the agency boss tells her that maybe because she did the job so perfectly, the count got anxious about leaving a loose end out there. Seeing how calm her boss is, Lacey explodes in rage. How can you just sit there and do nothing? That damn Count is doing all this just to avoid paying me. The boss sighs and reveals that actually, the Count offered her 20,000 gold coins to turn Lacey over to him. She should be grateful the boss didn't take the offer. Instead, she created an escape route for Lacey. After all, as annoying as the situation is, she needs to stay alive. One day, I'll make you pay for all this mess you caused. But for now, I want you to survive, because I actually kinda like you. The boss explains the escape plan to Lacey. She must head to the port right now and board a ship to get away. Using a magic earring that helps her change her appearance, Lacey runs off into the night toward the port. Her former agency colleagues pursue her, trying to catch her. They're fake friends who heard about the fat reward the Count is offering, and now they want the money. This only pisses Lacey off more. Damn people in this company who turn on you the moment they get the chance. Damn Count Hillsdale who dared to use her for years and then tossed her aside like trash. Lacey finally reaches the end of the dock, her ex-colleagues still chasing her and shouting vile things. Cornered and hearing their voices and footsteps drawing nearer, Lacey can't hold back her tears. My freedom. I worked so hard to reach it, I came so close. I can't end like this. Heavy rain begins to pour, followed by thunder. The pursuers finally get close enough to the end of the dock to hear a loud slash. They rush to the edge, looking for Lacey. I can't believe the damn girl threw herself into the sea in these conditions. There's no way we'll even find her body now. Frustrated, the men begin to walk away, convinced that Lacey will probably die at sea, and their 10,000 gold coin ticket is gone. At that moment, we see Lacey clinging to the outer side of a nearby ship, hidden. She had to lose all her belongings. She threw them into the sea to make the scene believable. But at least those money-hungry lunatics seem to have given up, believing she desperately threw herself into the ocean. Lacey begins to climb the side of the ship to reach its deck. Even though she's a bit early, maybe she got lucky and this is the ship the boss told her to use to escape. So, as long as no one finds out who she really is, she should be safe, Lacey thinks as she climbs. But as she reaches the top, she comes face to face with a guard wearing strange clothes. Both are startled and Lacey bolts into the ship. Quick, search every corner. We have to find her. Shout the men in a strange language as they search the interior of the ship for the intruder. Lacey, hiding in one of the rooms, watches them through a small crack in the door, hoping they won't come in her direction. But to her misfortune, she hears footsteps heading that way. Scared, she instinctively starts stepping back from the door, only to bump into something. Or rather, someone. Are you a thief? A deep male voice says behind Lacey, making her jump in fright. A strong man with tanned skin, short blonde hair, and a bare chest, wearing clothing clearly from another continent, stands behind her. He gently touches her hair and says, or maybe, you're just a stowaway? Surprised, Lacey turns toward the voice, and upon seeing the man, she recognizes him. We're transported into Lacey's memories, back to 2 years ago at the Hillsdale mansion. The Count informs Veronica that a delegation from the Empire of Arena is about to arrive in the city, and he expects that she has prepared herself in the best possible way to receive them. He emphasizes that she must pay extra attention to Prince Halid, the commander of the delegation. Veronica tells him that he's worrying too much because she is the perfect daughter and already has everything prepared. She knows how much of a perfectionist he is, so she assures him that everything will go well. But the Count still seems concerned. He begins to explain that having a good relationship with Prince Halid is important but is interrupted by his daughter. Because that way you can purchase items from the West more easily. And someone like you, who runs one of the best trading companies in Weldon, couldn't afford to miss that opportunity. The Count comments on how clever and shrewd his daughter is, but even so, she must not underestimate Prince Halid. That very day, at the evening ball to welcome the delegation, everyone gossips in awe at how wealthy the Empire of Arena seems to be, and how they flaunt it, having brought many jewels and precious stones. On top of all that, the prince is a strikingly handsome man with a commanding presence. He can impress and control an entire room with just a look. Lacey, who is also at the ball as Veronica, remains confident despite the rumors, believing she will charm Halid. She looks at him from behind her fan like a predator eyeing her helpless prey. At that moment, Halid, who had just entered the room, approaches her and says, "You look like a dog begging for attention." We return to the present with Lacey in disbelief that Halid is standing right in front of her. Halid recognizes her within seconds and greets her with slight sarcasm. "Veronica, it's been a while since I've seen you." Lacey tries to deceive him, saying he must be mistaken and has confused her with someone else. But Halid is confident she's Veronica and wants to know what she's doing on his ship. Wait, this ship belongs to the Empire of Arena? Did I board the wrong ship? But that's impossible, Lacey thinks, shocked by the situation she's gotten into. Khalid presses her for an answer, stepping even closer and asking if she's not going to respond. The guards outside are getting closer to the room where the two are. Thinking quickly, Lacey tries to lightly scratch Khalid's neck to stun him with the poison hidden beneath her nails. But Khalid is sharp and stops her. Realizing that Khalid might know about the poison, Lacey makes a desperate decision. She throws herself at Khalid and presses her lips against his, kissing him. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a kiss between the protagonists already in Chapter 3. Khalid returns Lacey's advances, the two get into a heated makeout session and end up falling onto the bed. When the guards, along with Simon, the prince's aide, enter the room, they're embarrassed to interrupt such a steamy scene. Meanwhile, all Lacey can think is how well Khalid kisses. The men quickly leave the room. Outside, one of the guards asks Simon if they should prepare to depart. Simon replies that if the patrol guard is sure he saw a mutant, then they must leave as soon as possible. A mutant had never been seen in Weldon before, so Simon needs to report this to His Highness. But he can't help but be excited by what he just witnessed in that room. Has a consort princess finally been chosen? While Simon is caught up in excitement over the events, Khalid exits the room. He informs Simon that they should stop the search on the ship because everything is under control, and they should prepare to set sail as soon as possible. After that, he returns to the room. He finds Lacey looking like a cornered animal, sitting and staring at Khalid. You should see your face in a mirror. You look like someone who was just taken advantage of. If someone saw you now, they'd never believe that you were the one who attacked me, Khalid says with a smile on his face. Lacey's mind is racing. Khalid Serum Hartman, Prince of the Empire of Arena, currently visiting the Kingdom of Weldon for trade reasons. I can't do anything against him, especially in this situation. Maybe appealing to his sympathy is the best option. The actress Lacey takes the stage. Her eyes begin to fill with tears as she tells in a sorrowful tone how she accidentally boarded the wrong ship. Khalid isn't fooled. He coldly asks if that's the best excuse she could come up with. He reveals that believing her right after she tried to attack him is difficult. Could she be sure she's not just a wanted criminal? As he says this, he extends the wanted poster toward Lacey. Spare me your made-up sob story, Veronica Hillsteel. We know each other very well, don't we? Our first meeting was hard to forget. We're transported once more to the past, into Lacey's memories, to the moment she and Khalid first met at that banquet. She remembers the ridiculous comparison Khalid made, calling her a begging dog. She was so furious she ended up slipping out of character and snapped back at him after he kept prodding, using his status as a foreigner and his lack of fluency in the kingdom's language as an excuse. She confronted him, saying his language skills seemed perfectly fine, unlike his ability to read people, which clearly needed improvement. The first prince of Weldon, noticing the tension between Veronica and Khalid, approached trying to defuse the situation, but with no success. Veronica and Khalid kept glaring at each other with hatred and exchanging veiled insults. But luckily, the angelic future bride of the first prince managed to calm the atmosphere, and thanks to her, the two princes reached an agreement. To Lacey's surprise, the Count was pleased with her hostility toward Khalid and ordered her to keep acting that way, so that her antagonism would make him more inclined to be friendly with the angelic bride. And like a good actress, Lacey gave her best performance, insulting Khalid in every way, calling him a barbarian, savage, primitive, and so on. We return to the present. Khalid is still waiting for an explanation from Lacey. He leans toward her and starts destroying the magical earring on her ear, revealing her true appearance. Lacey feels a wave of frustration. Magical items are rare and hard to use, and if not for that, she could have pulled off this performance without using her real face. But sadly, that wasn't an option. It's her first time being unmasked like this, and it makes her feel insecure, vulnerable. How does this man know everything? Why can he see so clearly who I really am? Khalid asks her once more, "What are you? A fugitive? A criminal? A thief? Answer me honestly this time." Lacey answers his question with another question. "What do you think I am?" Knowing you and knowing how loyal you were to Daniel Le Penwatherline, the first prince of Weldon, he probably forced you into some kind of plan. I know you'd go to hell for that man. Would you really be willing to be exiled across the ocean for him? Khalid asks, his face moving closer to Lacey's. At that moment, Lacey realizes the prince doesn't know everything. That gives her confidence, and she says, "I think you're a little mistaken. Every one of my actions has always been my own choice. A thief, a loyal servant, an infamous femme fatale. What role would you like me to play?" For the right price, if it interests me, I can play whatever part you want. So you're telling me it was all just acting? That mad passion for the first prince, all of it was just a performance to please a client who hired you? Khalid concludes. And you did all of that for money? Seems like you finally understood everything, Prince Khalid? Lacey confirms. There's a place east of Arena called Surayev. It's a beautiful city surrounded by desert, extremely wealthy. There's a house there with rooms full of gold, silver, rubies, and sapphires. You could choose any room you wanted, as long as you were willing to play the role of my fiancé this time. Khalid looks tenderly at Lacey as he says this. He gently touches her chin and makes her look directly into his eyes. I'm excited to see your performance. As my fiancé, the one I fell in love with at first sight. He then starts teasing her again. Or do you prefer the role of a stowaway? That would be a shame, because I really enjoyed what you did earlier. Khalid begins to reenact what they did before. If I'm not mistaken, you put your arms around my neck like this, and then came close to me and we kissed, didn't we? Khalid leans closer to Lacey's face, his lips brushing against hers. She feels her heart race and her cheeks flush. All right, I'll accept the role, Lacey replies, turning her face away. Satisfied with her answer, Khalid gently kisses her hand, informing her that with this answer, they will set sail immediately. The ship's crew is all stirred up, preparing to depart, when we see a man with wine-colored hair and brown eyes gazing sadly at the city gradually being left behind as the ship moves away from the port. Simon approaches him, seeming to understand what's on his mind. It may seem abrupt, but now that Prince Khalid has found the bride he was looking for, there's no reason to delay the return to Arena. The man gives a nostalgic smile and sadly agrees with Simon. It makes sense to leave. After all, they've accomplished what they came for. Simon seems concerned about how the man is feeling, and it's a pity they have to leave without finding the lost relative he was searching for. But the man reassures him, saying it's all right. That relative probably isn't in Weldon, as all their searches were in vain. But more important than that, he's excited about the news that the prince has finally found a consort princess. Simon cheerfully agrees with him and informs him that he has good news. They recently managed to capture a spy who had likely been operating since they left Arena. But it seems she got impatient and tried to seduce Prince Khalid, which led to her being caught. The man is shocked to hear that. The spy chose the worst possible way to approach the prince, since he has no patience for women like that. And so she was easily captured. The next day, the ship is already sailing, and meanwhile, Lacey is being spoiled with a banquet, which surprises her. She hasn't even signed the contract yet and is already being treated like this with such delicious food. But she can't let herself get distracted by those delights. Something's off. Why did the ship set sail the moment she boarded? It's almost like it was planned. Isn't it unusual for a delegation to leave without notifying the kingdom they were visiting? Couldn't that cause a diplomatic issue? And Khalid's behavior is strange. Things got resolved too easily. Nothing in this life is that easy. Lacey is deep in thought when Khalid enters the room, asking if the food is to her liking. She replies that the food is indeed delicious, but she would love his company since she needs to align some matters. As soon as Khalid sits down, Lacey goes straight to the point. She wants to know what kind of scheme he's planning. Since she'll be directly involved, she needs to know the details before signing anything. Khalid calmly replies that there is no scheme, but indeed, he was hiding something from her. At that moment, he looks into her eyes and mentally affirms that his objective was her. From the very beginning. Lacey asks what he was hiding, but Khalid simply responds that he hadn't planned to leave Weldon so soon. But since what he wanted came to him willingly, there was no reason to stay. Khalid's words irritate Lacey, who questions his intentions. So from the beginning, he planned to hire an actress from the agency? Khalid seems confused, clearly not understanding what she's talking about. But Lacey keeps talking, convinced she's figured out his entire scheme. The way he acted with her when they met, how he analyzed her, it was all a test to see if she was skilled enough. She's sure his true goal was to hire the actress who played Veronica. That's how he knew everything. The poison beneath her nails and the magical item she received from Madame, her boss at the agency. Remembering the magical item, Lacey feels a pang of sadness. The earring was a gift from Madame, and being such a rare item, she believed it was a secret only the two of them shared. Something that connected them. That makes her feel betrayed by Madame, like she'd been sold. Khalid must have spoken to Madame, who advertised Lacey's services to sell her off. After the job with the Count, she'd have no more use for Lacey and Weldon. Resentful about what she's just concluded, Lacey asks Khalid, how much did she cost him? Khalid, still not fully understanding what she's talking about, replies that he offered the most he could. Lacey recalls the events of the night, and in her mind, everything clicks into place. Even though she arrived at the port earlier than planned, the agency men were already there waiting for her, and even with the disguise, they knew who she was. She thought they only wanted the money, but apparently, all of this was part of Madame's plan to make sure she boarded the right ship without questioning anything. Khalid, confused about what's happening and not understanding Lacey's reaction, tries to say something, commenting that the situation seems to have gotten a bit awkward. Lacey, irritated, replies, "Awkward? I'd call this being deceived and blackmailed into accepting a job." Khalid asks if they're even talking about the same thing, because clearly he doesn't understand any of it. But Lacey has already made up her mind. She believes Khalid is just too embarrassed to admit everything, and worse, he's underestimating her. My God, the protagonist is getting ahead of herself. Lacey, girl, it's clearly a big misunderstanding, and you two are not talking about the same thing. I wish she'd stop assuming things out of nowhere. Lacey stands up and walks to Khalid. And then she kisses him. Khalid seems surprised at first, but soon gives in to Lacey's charms. He returns the kiss passionately. The kiss is intense. Hot? Good. Lacey is certain that Khalid desires her, that he's attracted to her. Lacey's heart races, but she tries to stay focused. She still feels betrayed by how everything unfolded. So if he's using her, then she'll use him too, Lacey concludes. After the intense kiss, Lacey, confident that she won't be swayed by emotion, asks Khalid for the contract so she can sign it. Khalid looks confused and asks about the contract. But Lacey quickly responds, "Of course, a contract. After all, you hired me, and formalizing things is part of the process." Later that same day, Khalid is taking a bath and talking with Simon. Khalid tells him a bit about what happened earlier, and Simon is extremely alarmed by what he hears. "A contract? But Your Highness, being a consort princess is not a temporary position. She will be responsible for many things in Arena, and will have to stay by your side. What will happen when the contract ends? Will you just let her leave?" says Simon El Saka, commander of the ship and Prince Khalid's right hand. Khalid, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, tells Simon that he doesn't intend to let her go, and he didn't even want to sign a contract. But he ended up going along with what she was saying, and things just turned out that way. Sure. You went along with her lips glued to yours? He. Khalid explains that from what he could understand, she's apparently a professional actress and is willing to play any role as long as she gets paid for it, and that Veronica Hillsdale was one of her main parts. Simon, still shocked, says it's a curious story. But how did he end up signing a contract? Khalid simply replies that he didn't quite understand what she was thinking, but decided to accept her offer, since it aligned with what he wanted. But that was very reckless, my prince. You're going to have to tell her the truth at some point and clear up this misunderstanding, replies Simon, still stunned after everything he heard. Khalid agrees with him. Things definitely need to be clarified. And since Simon is so smart, why doesn't he come up with a solution for the problem? Due to the ban, it's impossible for Khalid to bring up the subject himself. How is he supposed to tell her that, in fact, they met 10 years ago and made a promise to each other? Meanwhile, Lacey is in her room, wondering if she made the right choice. Now that she's calmer, she can think more clearly. The Empire of Arena is so far away, and crossing the ocean is always dangerous. But maybe all of this is for the best. At least in Arena, no one from Weldon will find her. As Lacey reflects on her recent choices, we're transported to Weldon, where we see the first prince, furious about Veronica's disappearance, ordering the guards to search everywhere. Count Hillsdale, angry, saying her actions were unforgivable, disappearing without his permission. Madame in the agency's office, telling a potential client that at the moment the agency isn't accepting new requests. She uses an earring to change her appearance, and in the same room, in the shadows, we see a mysterious man observing her. Back to Lacey. She wonders about such a specific role as fiancé, and as she looks at the bed, she remembers the earlier heated moments and blushes. Why is he so desperate to marry someone anyway? Khalid and Simon are still discussing how to tell Lacey everything. Simon suggests the prince tell her the truth in 3 days, as that's how long it takes for the ship to reach international waters. And then the ban will no longer be enforced, and he can explain that it was all a misunderstanding. But Khalid argues that she doesn't even remember him. If he brings up something from 10 years ago, she'll think he dug into her past before hiring her. And that would make her hate him. Simon is worried. But my prince, if you don't tell her the truth and the contract ends, she'll want to leave. Confident, Khalid says he's come to the most obvious solution. He'll seduce her. That way, she'll have no choice and will want to stay of her own will even after the contract ends. Simon seems unable to believe what he's hearing. But Khalid is seriously focused, thinking about how to win her heart. Giving in, Simon then asks how he plans to seduce her. Khalid turns to Simon and says that the plan is his job. Simon will have to come up with the plan, and Khalid will just execute it. Apologetically, Simon explains that he's not very experienced in that area. He also notes that he's never seen his lord so anxious and insecure about anything. Simon's thoughts are confirmed when Khalid asks if he should wear clothes or be naked in front of Lacey, since she seems to like bold men. Simon accidentally spits out the water he just drank, shocked by what the prince said. He warns that if the prince does that, he might scare the consort princess. Khalid asks seriously, "Do you really think so? She'd be afraid of me?" Simon replies, "Maybe yes, Your Highness." "You think? You shouldn't give advice if you're not sure about something. And another thing, stop shouting in my ear and dismissing my ideas. If the intention is to seduce and provoke her, then I should do something about my clothing. Stop judging me and do your job, Simon. Help me come up with a plan." Khalid, with a certain compassion in his eyes, points out that she seems to have been through a lot. He wishes he could erase her past. Simon warns Khalid that clinging to the past is useless. The important thing is to focus on the future. Khalid agrees with him, stating that even if she doesn't remember the promise they made in the past, he still will never let her go. He's in no rush and can wait. He wants to give her everything and make her happy. In the ship's dungeon, the spy prisoner somehow seems able to hear Khalid and Simon's conversation. She laughs wickedly, declaring she'll use his love for Lacey like a knife to pierce Khalid's lonely heart. Lacey, who had dozed off in her room, wakes up startled from a dream. Upon waking, she realizes someone is knocking on her door. She first thinks it's Khalid and gets annoyed that he's knocking. But when she opens it, she finds one of the guards, the same one who was thoughtfully speaking with Simon when they left Weldon. The guard explains that Khalid ordered him to protect the consort princess while he was bathing. Lacey sees this as a good opportunity to learn more about the Empire of Arena and starts bombarding the guard with every type of question. She asks mainly about Arena's noble society and its customs and etiquette, as if she's studying to play her role as best as possible. Unfortunately, the guard doesn't seem to know much beyond the basics, which frustrates our protagonist a bit. Later that same day, Khalid returns from his bath and finds Lacey sitting with the contract in her hands. It looks like she was waiting for him to return. But to his dismay, she's not waiting for the reasons he'd hoped. She informs him that he needs to read the terms she added and sign. Khalid, disappointed that she showed no reaction at all to seeing him practically half-naked and freshly bathed, begins reading the contract aloud. First, the contractor shall perform, at the client's request, the role of a foreign fiancé with whom he fell in love at first sight. Second, the client must protect the contractor's identity so the Kingdom of Weldon does not discover her. Third, the client must provide the actress with all the information she needs, along with financial and psychological support. Fourth, the client must pay the equivalent of 10,000 Weldon gold coins once the contract is successfully completed. Fifth, once the contract is completed and the service is provided, the client must never again seek out the actress or initiate any form of contact with her. Khalid notices, as he reads, that the part specifying how long the performance will last hasn't been filled in. But Lacey, realizing he's reached that section, explains that they hadn't defined that yet, which is why she was waiting for him to return and add the duration. She thinks the time frame should be a maximum of 2 years, because anything beyond that will make things much more difficult for her later on, and things could get complicated. Trying to change the subject, Khalid asks why there's no clause about what happens if she fails to play her role. Lacey, confident, replies that there isn't one because she knows she won't fail. But Khalid just looks at her suspiciously. She then adds a clause stating that if she fails as an actress, meaning if she fails to meet the terms of the contract, the client will have the right to be compensated in whatever way he desires, meaning she'll do anything he wants. Khalid blushes at the thought of Lacey doing whatever he wants. Suddenly, Lacey slaps the contract against the table and stands up, saying, all right, so the terms are set, right? 2 years of contract, because as I said, anything longer than that and the chances of trouble increase a lot, like the problems I had when I played Veronica. Besides, how can I be your fiancé for more than 2 years without us having an heir? People will start to get suspicious. Khalid turns bright red at the thought of having children with Lacey, which makes him cough nervously. Noticing this, Lacey asks if something's wrong. He awkwardly says no, but she gets straight to the point, saying she knows that sleeping together will be inevitable since they're entering a contract marriage, and since they're on the topic, she needs him to obtain some kind of magical contraceptive item. I want you to keep in mind that I don't intend to have any intimacy without protection. Your Highness, are you listening to me? Lacey says matter-of-factly. Excited by the idea of getting more intimate with Lacey, Khalid lifts her into his arms, stating that he agrees with the terms and that now would be a great time to do what married couples do. Lacey finally gets flustered. She asks him to wait a moment since they still need to sign the contract. But Khalid lays her on the bed and, looking into her eyes, says, "Do whatever you want with the contract, because I'm going to do whatever I want with you from now on." But to Khalid's disappointment, Lacey seems to have had an extremely long day and ends up falling asleep before anything more interesting can happen. Khalid doesn't get upset or angry. On the contrary, he shows incredible understanding and tenderness. He watches her for a moment, then gently covers her so she'll be more comfortable. At that moment, she stirs in her sleep as if she's having a nightmare. But Khalid gently kisses her forehead, trying to soothe her. The next day, we see Lana begging Simon to let her meet the consort princess. Lana is the twin sister of Luan, the guard who answered Lacey's questions the previous day. Simon denies Lana's request, informing her that she can meet the consort princess later, but not now. Lana throws a small tantrum while Luan, her brother, tries to calm her down. We learn from the gossip of other guards on the ship that despite the tantrum she's throwing now, Lana is a formidable warrior and earned major victories during the wars, which gained her Prince Khalid's trust. Still sulking, Lana is dragged back to her quarters, and meanwhile, Luan apologizes to Simon for his sister's childish behavior. Simon tells him not to worry. Lana didn't do anything wrong. Luan insists on apologizing. He explains that even though they came from a humble village, they now serve the royal family and must behave accordingly. Placing a hand on Luan's shoulder, Simon reassures him that everything is fine. Both he and Lana are talented guards who were personally chosen by Prince Khalid, and for that, they should be proud and walk with their heads held high. Luan smiles and nods at Simon. Meanwhile, in the couple's room, Khalid asks Lacey if she enjoyed the bath. Lacey, who looks extremely comfortable in a luxurious bathrobe, tells him the bath was wonderful. Divine. The best bath she's ever had. The fact that Lacey is wearing 3 golden hoop bracelets on her left arm seems to catch Khalid's attention. He blushes slightly and says he's glad she enjoyed the bath. The only strange thing during the bath was how the maids were acting a little oddly. Lacey recalls. Maybe it's because she doesn't speak the same language as the maids, but Lacey noticed that they seemed extremely happy to be helping her bathe. It was almost like they were worshiping her, especially when she tried to thank them for the service. The maids all got excited and started chatting animatedly among themselves. Lacey admits to Khalid that now that she's thought about it, the maids were so happy and attentive that they didn't even find it strange that a consort princess showed up out of nowhere on the ship. Khalid doesn't seem to understand Lacey's concern. He tells her that he asked the maids to give her the best treatment, so he hopes she liked it. But now that she's done with her bath, it's time for him to apologize. Lacey, confused, asks what he needs to apologize for. At that moment, Khalid leans over Lacey seductively and says, "Apologize for saying I'd finish what I started last night." Almost kissing her, he suggests they continue from where they left off the night before. Lacey, embarrassed, reminds Khalid that she said she wouldn't do anything without protection first. Gently taking Lacey's left arm and showing her the bracelets, Khalid explains that she's already protected, especially since she's wearing 3 instead of just 1. Sure that she got the message, Khalid kisses her and immediately begins to touch her. Still a bit confused and embarrassed, Lacey looks to the side and something catches her attention. A huge tiger sitting in one of the corners of the room. Frightened, she asks Khalid what the hell that is. Khalid calms Lacey and explains that it's a Teru, his guardian, and its name is Zeppi. Unlike Weldon, in the Empire of Arena, magic still exists, and people possess magical powers. When someone is able to properly control their powers, part of their mana takes the form of a guardian. They're called Teru. I'm the only one who can summon a Teru beyond the border. Don't worry about Zeppi. He won't hurt you. Now, shall we continue what we were doing? Or do you not want to? Khalid says, teasing and touching Lacey again. Lacey's heart is racing. She wants Khalid to continue. He makes her feel amazing. She never imagined that being held and kissed by someone could feel so wonderful. There's just one problem. She's a professional actress. Pretending to be in love with someone would be easy, but sex, that's complicated because she has no idea what to do. She's still a virgin. Lacey remembers how at the agency, Madame always emphasized to everyone that the job was acting. Giving your heart to someone to make the performance more convincing would always lead to dangerous problems. The ideal was to steal someone's heart, never give away your own. The memory brings Lacey back to her senses. This is dangerous, she thinks as she stops Khalid's advances. Trying to come up with an excuse to justify the refusal, Lacey repeats that she already said she wouldn't do anything without a magical contraceptive item. Khalid shows Lacey the golden bracelets again. This time, he explains that they are magical contraceptive items, and wearing just one would be enough. In fact, he thought she was giving him a subtle hint when she said she was going to take a bath and came back wearing 3 of those bracelets. The moment Lacey hears Khalid say that, she remembers the 3 maids putting the bracelets on her wrist and getting all excited. Now their excitement makes sense. Impatient, Khalid picks Lacey up like a princess and starts carrying her toward the bed. Lacey, trying to pull herself together, makes Khalid put her down. She tells him she's going to add a clause to the contract. No unnecessary sexual intimacy. She will act as his fiancé in public, but behind closed doors, she doesn't have to play that role. Khalid is clearly unhappy with the new clause in the contract, but he ends up agreeing. Both of them sign the contract. Lacey then asks Khalid to give her a name. He, confused, asks why a name. Clearly, she can't use the name Veronica anymore, but he imagined she would just use her real name. Lacey says her real name is a secret, because it's the only way she can protect herself. Neris, the name of the sea goddess would be perfect for you, says Khalid, smiling at her. Lacey's heart starts racing again. Maybe because of Khalid's charming smile, or maybe because she heard his voice saying her new name. Meanwhile, in the ship's dungeon, Simon and Luan are talking about the prisoner. Luan says she's finally calmed down. Simon assumes she was using some type of magic, considering she managed to hide for quite a long time. Luan confirms Simon's suspicions, but says they still haven't been able to identify what kind of magic she has. But he will interrogate the suspect until she tells them everything. With a serious look, Simon says the interrogation won't be necessary. After all, it'll be the end for her once they reach Arena, because he will strip her of her magic. With a distant expression, Luan comments that that would be even worse than death for her. As the two walk away from the prisoner's cell, the prisoner grabs the bars tightly. And then something begins to glow. The scene cuts to Prince Khalid's quarters. Simon is formally introducing himself to Lacey, or rather, to Neris. He apologizes for taking so long to introduce himself. With a beautiful smile, Lacey says it's all right. After all, they've already seen each other. Remembering the steamy scene he witnessed, Simon composes himself and simply nods. Trying to be polite, she thanks Simon for his hard work and says she hopes to count on him in the future. Simon is extremely flattered by the consort princess's words. Khalid interrupts the sweet moment between the two, reminding Simon that he was called there to check on Lacey's health. The fact that she hasn't been sleeping well might be a sign of something more serious, and that worries Khalid. After asking her permission, Simon examines her in a rather unusual way and concludes that apparently there's nothing wrong with her health, but rather with her. Khalid is relieved to hear this and leaves the room, telling them he needs to check on a few things on the ship. Lacey takes the opportunity to ask Simon what the prince told him about her. Simon replies that the prince mentioned she was his fiancée, and as such would become the future queen of the Empire of Arena. In addition, he said he fell in love with her at first sight, that she was still getting used to the Arena language, and that her meals should always be prepared with only high-quality, nutritious ingredients. Curious, Lacey asks him why no one seems to be asking about her, since she boarded the ship as a stowaway. Simon explains that the guard who saw her board doesn't remember her face, and in general, the guards have a hard time understanding Weldon's language. They also know nothing about what happens in Weldon, so there's no way they could know about the wanted poster. At that moment, Lacey realizes Simon knows much more than he just told her. He definitely knows about Veronica, and since he seems fluent in the Weldon language, he must have heard all the outrageous things she said to Prince Khalid when she was playing Veronica. Realizing this, she asks Simon if he's really okay with her being in the position she's in, since he knows everything. Bowing to the consort princess, Simon assures her that it's all right, and he shows the sincerity of his words through his actions. Lacey smiles at Simon, thanking him again, which makes him blush from her kindness. Looking at the shine of the golden bracelets on her wrist, Lacey asks Simon about them, if it's common for people to wear them in Arena. Simon explains that the bracelets are quite rare and unusual to wear, as they were made especially for Prince Khalid. Only he, and now she, wears that bracelet. Upon hearing this, a small twinge of jealousy stings Lacey's heart, and she wonders, does he use this bracelet to get intimate with other people? Unaware of Lacey's expression, Simon continues talking about the prince. Prince Khalid descends from the Hartman family, the royal family of the Empire of Arena. He is the most qualified to become heir to the throne, skilled both in combat and strategy as well as intelligent. and his looks and beauty are such that women fall hopelessly in love with him all the time. Despite that, His Highness has never been involved in any romantic scandals. He also has no fiancées and doesn't accept concubines. Practically perfection in the form of a prince. Even with all that praise, Lacey keeps thinking that Khalid invites random women to be intimate, and that leaves her sulking. Simon, noticing Lacey's upset and thoughtful expression, wonders if he said something wrong. Lacey realizes that Khalid must be very loved in the Empire of Arena, which could be bad for her. People might get suspicious when suddenly a consort princess appears out of nowhere. Simon reassures Lacey, saying that people might be surprised, but they won't think anything bad. Neither about her nor about Prince Khalid, because no woman has ever been able to capture His Majesty's heart. Khalid returns. Seeing that Simon and Lacey are chatting so cheerfully, he looks at Simon with suspicion, as if he might have said too much. He orders Simon to leave since he's finished what he needed to do. He seems a bit irritated. At first, Lacey thinks maybe he's jealous of her with Simon, but she decides to ask if everything's okay on the ship, since he left in such a hurry earlier. Khalid replies that everything is under control. But at that moment, the scene cuts to the ship's dungeon, where Luan reports to Khalid that the prisoner has escaped. Several guards were injured when she broke free. She must still be on the ship. She'll try to attack you, Your Majesty, says Luan, concerned. Khalid suspects she had an ally on board who helped her escape. Luan questions why she must be kept alive until they reach Arena, since she's clearly more dangerous than they imagined. Holding firm to his principles, Khalid reminds Luan that his convictions on how to handle prisoners remain the same, regardless of the threat they pose. We return to the present. Lacey notices Khalid deep in thought and asks if he's sure everything is all right. He smiles, assuring her that everything's taken care of, and there's nothing she should worry about. Noticing the papers near Lacey, he compliments her for dedicating herself to learning more about Arena. Proudly, Lacey brags about being committed to her work. Who knows? If I do well enough, maybe my dear client will give me a bonus, she says with a charming smile. She moves closer to him and, looking into his eyes, reminds him that he promised her everything she wanted. In response to her comment, Khalid asks what she truly desires. Lacey pulls back, thoughtful, without saying a word. But deep down, she knows what she wants. Freedom. She's always been trapped in some way. Being free is her greatest wish. She begins to imagine a future where she's free of debt, poverty, and the agency's grip. She reaches her hand out happily towards someone. Khalid. His hand touches hers. She snaps out of her daydream, startled by what she was just thinking. Is she letting her emotions take over? Khalid, still waiting for an answer, looks at her, confused. Snapping back into character, Lacey replies that what she wants most is money. Khalid looks at her with disapproval. On the ship's deck, Simon and Luan gossip about Lacey. They're impressed by the purity of the mana she radiates. Her presence is truly striking, almost as strong and pure as that of a priest. Even her words seem to carry magic within them. Simon reflects on how he sees Lacey in his mind while speaking with Luan. Luan is excited to see Lacey's true potential once they finally cross the border. Apparently, the ban they mention restricts magic within the Kingdom of Weldon. They're not even allowed to speak about it. After meeting her, Simon seems to understand why the prince was so determined to find her again. Her power seems so great that she may possess purification abilities. Luan says goodbye to Simon as he heads off for his patrol. Simon remains there on the deck, thoughtful, worried about whether Lacey will be all right. She seems amazing, but jumped headfirst into this without truly knowing what she was getting into. I just hope the prince keeps a good relationship with the consort princess until he can explain everything to her, says Simon aloud, thinking. Khalid approaches Simon and apologizes for making his concerns a reality. He fears he may have ended up ruining everything with Lacey. Explaining what he means, Khalid tells Simon that he and Lacey had a small disagreement. He got irritated and offended by how shallow she seemed, only wanting money. He knows that's not really all she thinks about, and he tried to get her to tell him the truth, but she just kept getting more and more upset with him, which only makes things even more complicated. For him. Now alone in the room, Lacey thinks about freedom. She's always wished for it with all her strength, but never really thought about what to do once she actually achieved it. Maybe it's because she's so used to having everything decided for her. But for a brief moment, Khalid came to her mind when she thought about being free. He's the one giving her one more chance to truly be free. With a warm and calm gaze as he called her name, for a moment she wished none of it was just a contract. But love isn't something included in the contract they signed, especially not when the man in question is someone so important to an empire, someone who needs several contraceptive bracelets. Roar. Lacey's thoughts are interrupted by Zeppi's roar, who had been in the room the entire time and is now stretching while adjusting his position on his comfy bed. Frightened by how gigantic Zeppi is, she complains that she can't get a single minute of peace on this trip. Zeppi starts walking toward Lacey, which terrifies her even more. She trembles in fear, wishing he would back off. Khalid returns just in time, and Lacey is relieved to see him. He says it seems she and Zeppi are getting used to each other. But Lacey only complains about how long he took and how he could possibly leave her alone with such a huge beast. Smiling with relief, Khalid concludes that Lacey seems to be feeling better, because when he left the room, she looked very upset and sad about something. Khalid looks sternly at Zeppi, who gets the message and leaves the room. He then kneels in front of Lacey and says he needs her to do something. It's time to earn approval. Soon they'll be entering the waters of the Empire of Arena, and because of that, he needs her to stay by his side while they perform the ritual in honor of the divine commander of the sea. If they fail, they may end up facing storms and rough weather. Or worse, the ship could sink. While the maids dress Lacey in a beautiful black gown and expensive accessories, she can't help but be impressed by how superstitious the people of Arena seem to be. Khalid returns to the room to check that Lacey is all right. "Of course I'm fine. You said I just have to stand by your side." Khalid approaches her and gently touches her hair. Lacey becomes flustered. "He's going to kiss me? He's really going to kiss me in front of the maids." She closes her eyes, blushing with anticipation. But Khalid simply adjusts the necklace around her neck. He reassures her that it's normal to feel anxious about meeting the ruler of the sea. And then he leaves to prepare the final details of the ceremony. "See you later," says Lacey, relieved. What the hell was I thinking he was going to do? I need to stop letting emotions take over and focus on the job. Outside, Simon tells His Majesty that he's concerned about the consort princess. She might be shocked by the ritual. With a confident smile, Khalid believes some things are better experienced firsthand. Beautifully dressed, Lacey walks to the ship's deck. As she enjoys the fresh air and the sea breeze, she hears a sound she doesn't quite recognize. Turning toward the sound, she sees several people bowing in reverence to her. Impressed by the crew's reaction, she seems to finally understand what Simon told her the other day about how the people of Arena would react to her. A green-haired girl accompanying them nods approvingly to Lacey, who understands the signal and begins to walk confidently toward the ceremony site. As she passes the people, they begin to rise to their feet. Lacey feels a bit intimidated by it all. If she had stood still in front of those people, they might still be bowing. She's standing near the edge of the deck, gazing out at the sea, when one of her maids approaches and drapes a cape over her shoulders. Though the cape is thin and light, it seems to warm her well. Lacey notices an unusual glow in one of the gems that fastens the cape, and then she realizes that, just like the bracelets, the cape is also a magical item. She hears something approaching. Turning around, she sees Zeppi coming closer and walking alongside her. At first, she wants to hide, but she can't. She's in public and must act like Prince Khalid's fiancée, future Queen of Arena. She then tries to ignore Zeppi and maintain her noble posture. It works because people start commenting about her and Zeppi. How incredible it is that he approached her on his own, and how he acts adorably only around her. No wonder she's the consort princess. Once again, the sound of people bowing to someone plays like music in Lacey's ears. She looks relieved toward Khalid, who has just stepped onto the deck. He looks as stunning as always, but this time in black attire that matches hers. As Khalid approaches Lacey, people comment on how amazing they look together and how beautiful the consort princess is. Khalid gently extends his hand to Lacey, and she responds in kind. The warm touch of Lacey's hand distracts her for a second. Khalid brings his face close to her ear and says that her performance is truly wonderful. He almost believed she was genuinely happy to see him. Khalid's words unsettle Lacey, because in that moment, she truly wasn't acting. The sound of gold bars catches the couple's attention. Servants are preparing a grand table of offerings. Jewels, gold, fruit. It's downright impressive. Everyone there seems very focused on their tasks, which makes Lacey a little worried. She asks Khalid if she really doesn't have to do anything. Khalid repeats what he told her before. She just needs to stay by his side. Nothing more. Everything seems ready. You don't need to be afraid. Khalid says to Lacey as the ship sails toward the edge of the maritime border. Lacey doesn't fully understand what's happening, but seeing how committed everyone is, she prepares herself for whatever is about to happen. Simon announces that they are crossing the border. Right after, a very loud noise comes from the sea as the entire ship begins to shake. Lacey is a little frightened, but Khalid remains steady and confident beside her. One of the guards blows a conch trumpet as if announcing the arrival of something. The ship keeps shaking even more. Lacey doesn't know exactly what's going on, but one thing she's certain of. Something is in the water beneath the ship. Something big. She shrinks back, moving closer to Khalid, who embraces her with one arm. He remains confident, not at all surprised by everything happening. Lacey notices. Raspy voices in a strange language begin shouting deafeningly. But the noise soon stops and is replaced by the chanting of some of the servants aboard the ship. Lacey looks at Khalid, who is confidently staring at the sea. He raises the staff in his hand and commands something to open, speaking in Irina's native language. Bright blue eyes open in the depths of the sea as the waves stir a little more. Khalid takes Lacey's hand, placing her hand over his, and with a gentle motion in the air, it's as if they're touching a floating water bubble. A strong glow that begins from the place where they touch the air starts to spread through all the air around them. The song the servants were singing before was in an unfamiliar language. Now Lacey understood it clearly. They were singing about a powerful and celestial creature, praising this being that cast out the darkness and protected them. In response to the entire ritual, a magical creature emerged from the sea. A kind of celestial water dragon watched them. Lacey, still unable to believe everything she was seeing, turned to Khalid saying that something was wrong. But Khalid only looked at Lacey with a warm smile and said, "Welcome to Irina." Lacey hears the sound of a soft bell. She feels dizzy. Still trying to understand all of it while looking at Khalid's warm smile, she faints. The voices of the worried people saying the princess consort had fainted mix with the magical song of the servants. At that moment, we hear Lacey's voice. A Lacey apparently from the future who is recalling the past with nostalgia. Back then, I had no idea of the meaning behind that ritual. I thought it was just a superstition. I had no clue about the creature I was about to come face to face with. But more importantly, that day I discovered a side of myself I didn't even know existed. Did Khalid know that all along? It took me quite some time to realize that Khalid probably knew more about me than I did myself. We see Lacey being carried by Khalid after her fainting on the deck. Embarrassed, she asks Khalid to put her down on the ground. But no matter how much she insists that she is fine, he refuses to let her go. Simon warns that she has expended a lot of energy and therefore needs to rest. And considering how strong the synastry is between her and the prince, the closer they are to each other, the faster she will recover. Lacey has no idea what synastry is, but before she can ask anything, she notices something on Simon's shoulder and asks what that is. Simon explains that that snake is his teru, and now that they have crossed the border, he can summon his guardian. Lacey comments that she has heard about the teru but asks what this synastry is. Simon explains that the mana that she and the prince possess is extremely compatible, so much so that just being together has a positive effect on their magic. And for the people of Irina, magic is... But Khalid interrupts impatiently, saying that he is taking too long to explain things, and at this rate, they will be talking all night. He then turns to Lacey and says that simplifying it, Irina is the realm of sorcerers, leaving this narrator and Simon perplexed by the poor explanation. But Khalid ignores Simon's reaction and just asks him to leave so Lacey can rest. Lacey stops him, demanding a more detailed explanation. Simon discreetly looks at Khalid, who nods positively to him, authorizing him to explain. The border is described as the waters that stretch between the central continent and Irina. It can also be understood as the point where magic ceases to exist and the place where it still persists. The ship has just crossed this line. The protagonist, remembering a few moments ago, questions what the dark shadow she saw beneath the ship was. And Simon responds that it would be the dragon that governs and protects the balance between the two lands, and that the entire stretch of sea to Irina remains under the dominion of this creature. Lacey repeats the word dragon, somewhat disbelieving, and a bit irritated. Simon retorts that the name of the dragon is Aegir, and that he rarely appears in his true form. It is more common for him to appear only as a shadow, and that perhaps the reason he showed his true form is that he was curious about Lacey. Khalid waves his hand, calling Simon's attention. He then questions whether Simon is trying to scare her or make her feel proud, and that he has already explained enough for today and now must let her rest. Lacey then asks Simon to tell her more tomorrow. Simon feels relieved to see that Lacey was not frightened by all this information. On the contrary, she seemed extremely enthusiastic and curious about everything. He believes this is a sign that she will adjust easily to life in the capital of Irina. Barely letting Simon respond to Lacey's request, Khalid picks her up in his arms again and starts walking towards the bed, saying that now she really must rest. He gently places her on the bed, then turns to leave, saying that she will probably sleep better if he is not there. Lacey looks at Khalid irritably, mentally questioning if today is the day. She then says that perhaps she should be the one to leave. Khalid looks at her confused, with no idea what she is talking about. She rhetorically asks if he couldn't bring them here because of her. Lacey then says that since they are on the subject, she would like to know how many there are and how often he changes them. Khalid, still not understanding, asks what she is talking about. Clearly annoyed, Lacey says that she is talking about Khalid's concubines. She asserts that she knows they are just acting, but she believes she has the right to know about this, as his consort in name. And since it is important for them to maintain appearances, it would be strange for him to be sleeping in another room, so it makes more sense for her to leave. Khalid becomes irritated by what he just heard, and interrupts Lacey, saying that he has heard enough. He pushes her onto the bed, positioning himself beneath her. She looks away, so he insists that she look at him. He asks if she has the courage to say what she just said, looking her in the eyes. With a pained expression, he asks her not to doubt his words, and then asserts that there is no other woman besides her, pleading for her not to make him feel more miserable than he already is. He then stands up, apologizing for his aggression. Lacey looks at him confused as he leaves the room, asking her to rest well. Somewhat impulsively and not fully understanding why she was doing it, she asks him to wait. Then she walks towards him and kisses him. Khalid's gaze reflected such deep pain that all she could think upon seeing that was to comfort him and do anything to avoid hurting him. It was almost as if hurting him was a crime she had just committed. "What does this mean?" Khalid questions with eyes full of hope. Lacey apologizes for her mistake, and Khalid breathes a sigh of relief. He confessed that he couldn't believe she would misunderstand his actions so badly. He had always avoided having women by his side precisely so she would understand how serious his feelings were. He had never had any woman and would never have anyone but her. He comments that those bracelets are magical, but they were given to her as a gift, thinking about how beautiful she would look wearing them. A bit frustrated, he says that both he and the priestesses failed to provide an adequate explanation regarding the bracelet. The protagonist becomes curious upon discovering that the three helpers are actually priestesses. She then gives a slight smile and admits to feeling relieved to know that it was all just a misunderstanding. Lacey's beautiful smile makes Khalid's heart race, enamored. He stares and says he would like something else instead of an apology. Lacey blushes with a warm look at Khalid. She understands what he wants and knows that his gaze is also seeking her consent, and that makes her heart race as she nods positively. This time she was right about her feelings, and she wanted the same thing he wanted. The scene cuts to the two lying in bed, side by side. Lacey then asks if people found it strange that she fainted during the ceremony. She brings her hand to her face, a bit embarrassed and worried about having made a bad first impression. But Khalid reassures her, ensuring that she did well in her first social appearance. He corrects himself, saying that she wasn't just good, she was perfect, and that despite her fainting, she did so discreetly in his arms. Moreover, as Simon said, it is rare for the dragon to show interest in someone, so him revealing himself to her was a huge honor. Khalid assures her that she is irreplaceable, and should never forget that. Meanwhile, in Weldon, the irritated madam asserts to someone for the second time that she doesn't know where the girl is. We see that she is speaking with Lacey's former client, who says, frustrated, that the entire capital has been thoroughly searched, but not even a strand of her hair has been found. He then accuses the agency of covering up the girl's traces. Slamming his hand on the table in irritation, he asserts that he is sure the madam planned all of this from the beginning. Unfazed, the madam comments that the man's words are quite harsh. The woman slides the document across the table, explaining that the actress fulfilled exactly what was requested in the contract. In fact, she exceeded expectations for the role. The madam stares coldly and asks how he has the audacity to say that, being the same man who tried to have the woman killed just for doing her job too well. She also states that each person there had been handpicked and trained to carry out any task without fail, and for that reason, it was extremely rude of him to come and accuse her in front of her employees. And because of that, perhaps she should be more selective when choosing her clients as well. Madame doesn't joke around and says this while her employees make the threat very clear. The Duke grits his teeth and says it's impossible to remove someone from the wanted list once that person is on it, and that the best option is to assume she is dead. That way, at least, she will be removed from the wanted list without raising suspicions. The Madame gives a victorious smile, telling the Duke that he is doing a great job and thanking him for helping her. But the Duke says that actually he has a new job for her, in exchange for removing the actress from the list. He reveals that he wants her to ensure that the actress will never appear in the country of Weldon again. The madam looks incredulous at the Duke's audacity and wonders how Lacey was able to endure that man for so many years. Getting straight to the point, she asks how much the Duke would pay for this service. 10,000, exactly the price for the head of her false daughter. The madame seems satisfied with the amount that will be paid. She then bows to the Duke as he leaves, thanking him for the sponsorship. But mentally, something about that man bothers her. She is sure he is hiding something. As the Duke walks away, she remembers that Lacey was her most profitable actress, and that one day she hoped to train her as her successor. But unfortunately, things did not evolve the way she imagined, and she truly hopes Lacey does not take it the wrong way. Someone approaches, and she turns, showing that she knows who the person is, who is not the type to eavesdrop on others' conversations. A man with red eyes enters the place, and the madame asks what he is doing there. He takes off his top hat, and we see that he also has red hair, just like the madame. It's almost as if they were twins. The man then says that she already knows why he is there. The man says he wasn't eavesdropping, and in fact, he was just in the right place to hear. And it wasn't his fault that no one had noticed his presence. Madame seems irritated by the man's presence and immediately says that she doesn't like him interfering in things this way. With a threatening look, he asserts that if she really wanted him to respect her personal space, then she shouldn't have meddled in what was his. His voice becomes colder and more authoritative as he demands to know where Lacey is. Calling him instructor, she says that Lacey does not belong to him. The man, ignoring Madame's veiled warning, orders her to answer his question. She looks at him with disdain and asks if she looks like someone who would know where Lacey is. She knows that unlike the Duke, dealing with the instructor will not be such a simple task. Despite this, she cannot help but wonder in her mind. Since when had he become so obsessed with Lacey? The man claims that she would be the only person capable of helping Lacey disappear. She sighs, maintaining her composure, and calmly says that he can believe what he wants. But the truth is that Lacey managed to escape her control, and that the ship she had prepared for her escape left with Lacey's cabin empty. She casts a confident look in the man's direction. He then stands up, having heard enough, and says that he believes what she said. After all, Lacey has always been a box of surprises. And because of that, the next time they meet, he needs to compliment her. She looks at him coldly, mentally questioning if he really believes that Lacey would want to see him again. The instructor puts his hat back on and says that he also has a job for her. She should contact him as soon as she has any news about Lacey, and that he will pay whatever amount she wants in exchange for the service. The man leaves, and the madame finally has a moment of peace and calm. She spills coffee into a plant pot, where the earring that matches the one she gave to Lacey is, despite the chaotic day, she remains calm, thinking that since the instructor didn't mention anything about the earring, maybe he doesn't know what it does. Luckily, she seems to be the only one capable of realizing that it is a magical artifact, and that it can also be used, besides disguising, to find other people. While burying the ring, she thinks that secrets are meant to remain hidden, and it's much better to betray someone than to be betrayed. The scene returns to our protagonists. Khalid watches Lacey thoughtfully, happy that she finally opened up to him, but at the same time wondering why she insisted on drawing a line between them if she would only provoke him to cross it. And in the end, he couldn't contain himself. She initially rejected his touch only to kiss him and try to seduce him when it was more convenient for her. He admits that this ended up bringing them closer. When she threw herself at him with calculated kisses and insincere actions, his heart sank in sadness. But that day, she greeted him with such a sincere and inviting expression that he felt as if the whole world had stopped. Even the reluctant sighs of air escaping her lips seemed sweet. She is a cruel person, capable of making his heart race just by being near. But she doesn't remember who he is, and doesn't even trust him. He wonders if that was when all the problems between them began, 10 years ago, when she asked him to meet her again after 10 years. Those words became his salvation and at the same time his curse. Someone enters the room, pulling Khalid from his thoughts. Simon apologizes for the intrusion, but there are urgent problems that require Your Majesty's attention. Khalid then questions if the problem is related to the lower deck, and Simon confirms. He then reveals that the prisoner has decided to end her own story. Upon hearing this, Khalid quickly stands up. He leaves the room with Simon, asking him to tell him the details on the way. Meanwhile, Lacey writhes a bit in bed. She trembles and murmurs, seeming to be having a very bad nightmare. In her murmurs, she says she needs to escape. We discover that our protagonist is dreaming about her past. We see a young Lacey in front of the instructor. He praises her performance, saying she learned the basics perfectly. The instructor runs his fingers over his own lips and then tells her to keep something in mind when on a mission. She should use that technique only to attract the target, without being fooled into thinking she has created an emotional bond. He says this while bringing his hand closer to her face, and she discreetly pulls away, clearly rejecting his touch. He observes her hesitation, a bit disappointed, while in her mind she screams for help for an escape, returning to Simon and Khalid. Simon reports that it seems the prisoner bit her own tongue off. Upon hearing this, Khalid appears irritated, questioning who the fool was that removed her gag. A bit awkward, Simon explains in more detail what happened. While the ship crossed the border, some guards watching the prisoner were having a meal near her cell. One of them comments that he can't even remember the last time he had wine, and the other replies that it's thanks to the ceremony that they can enjoy luxuries like that. The third man tells them to be quiet, saying that if they get caught, their pay will be reduced. In the cell, the prisoner starts coughing a lot as if she were choking, which catches the attention of one of the guards. One of them questions if she is sick. Even so, what she was doing, drooling everywhere, was very disgusting. Realizing that she seemed to be choking more and more, he approaches and removes the gag from her mouth, saying that she needs to breathe better and cannot perish as she is still being interrogated. But all of that was apparently an act by the woman, as she gave a sinister smile as soon as the man removed the bindings covering her mouth. Khalid comments irritably that it seems being back in the waters of Arena after 2 years has excited everyone. He apologizes to Your Highness, admitting that everything happened due to his negligence. But Khalid places a hand on his shoulder, telling him not to blame himself, affirming that he knows him better than anyone, how careful Simon is, and that in no way could this be his fault. Still, things are clearer now. Surely the prisoner must have some ally infiltrated among his men. At this moment, it is pointless to investigate, as with everyone drunk, he doubts they can help with anything. Arresting everyone is also not an option, as some may be innocent. Someone approaches, overhearing what Khalid just said, and says that no one involved should be considered innocent. Luan steps forward and asserts that although Mr. Simon blames himself for what happened, the responsibility lies with the guards, who failed to fulfill their duty by not controlling themselves. Simon comments that Luan didn't even touch alcohol, but Luan seems determined to take responsibility and responds that all the soldiers will follow Your Highness's orders and pay for the mistake made. Khalid gently touches Luan's head and asks if he really expects him to punish those who have worked tirelessly for the past 2 years, people he considers family, just to capture a spy. He then questions if this is the kind of person they believe him to be, and he concludes by saying that what has been done is done. Now they need to focus on looking for clues. Khalid comments that the prisoner must have had an accomplice, probably the same one who tried to help her escape before. Therefore, he finds what happened strange, suggesting that perhaps someone did something to her. And the most suspicious thing is that this happened as soon as they crossed the border. Why that specific moment? Simon suspects that maybe she needed mana to do what she did. Khalid adds that if she used magic, there must be traces left behind. Therefore, he orders the investigation to focus on that. Excited about the mission, Luan and Simon tell His Majesty not to worry, as they will take care of the investigation. They advise him to enjoy his time with the consort princess. But Khalid says he won't be able to relax now that they have crossed the border. Luan then asks if he says that because he is worried about the mutants. The prince gives Luan a light pat on the shoulder and comments, with a smile, that it was good not to have to worry about attacks during their stay in Weldon. But now the situation is different, and unfortunately, at the moment, both Luan and Simon can barely summon their Tarus. Therefore, it will be safer and faster if he takes a look at this personally. Awkwardly, they cannot deny that what Khalid said is true. He departs with his Teru and suggests leaving the investigation of the lower deck guards to Lana, since she is probably itching to have something to do. Simon laughs and says she is certainly perfect for the role. Luan, a bit embarrassed, comments that he will have to accompany her to prevent her from getting into trouble. Khalid whispers to Simon that he should have been able to sense what happened even before it occurred. Despite reprimanding himself, Khalid pinches one of Simon's cheeks and comments that he needs to stay alert so that this doesn't happen again. Simon massages the cheek that was pinched while thinking that the prince must be distracted, as he has been paying a lot of attention to the consort princess. Meanwhile, somewhere, curtains sway with the wind coming through the open window, and small orange sparks begin to appear in the air. They enter the room and hover over someone sleeping in their bed. The person who is sleeping then opens their eyes, and soon after, they shine red for a moment before returning to normal. In a cold tone, they wonder if the woman has already left. The woman gets up still groggy and comments on how pathetic the situation is, as the master seemed to have high expectations. She smiles grimly, runs her hand over her belly, and says that it is up to her to ensure that the life of the poor ant was not in vain. Then, she speaks softly, asking if the little one doesn't think the same. A week has passed since they crossed the border. Lacey is quietly enjoying a cup of tea, completely unaware of the tensions that are happening. She seems excited about the warm weather and the beautiful scenery around her. She comments that even though she has been stuck inside the cabin all day, she can still tell the exact temperature, humidity, and wind speed outside. And this is only possible because since they crossed the border, everyone has been able to use magic again. She is truly impressed with the number of things that can be done with magic, even redecorating an entire room. It's hard to believe that this elegant room belongs to Khalid. Simon approaches and asks if she is ready to start her lessons. She smiles excitedly at the new world opening up before her, full of new things. So you are saying that water, fire, wind, and earth are the 4 elements of magic, but even if you possess 2 of the same element, you can still develop different abilities? Says Lacey in her study session with Simon. Proudly, showing her knowledge, she continues by saying that in Simon's case, he only possesses the water element in his magic, yet he has the to heal and calm others. Simon claps proudly for his dedicated student. She explains that Terrace also served to determine the first impression someone makes. Simon, excited, praises her, saying that she understood everything perfectly. Looking at Simon's Teru, she can't help but find it cute. Perhaps because Simon only possesses non-aggressive magic. She thinks for a moment and murmurs, wondering if that's why he sometimes seems so easy to manipulate. Simon looks at her confused, since he didn't quite catch what she just said. She remembers that at another time he mentioned that magic could not be used in Weldon. So she asks, why was it banned? He explains that this was done to maintain the balance between the 2 lands. The central continent is a place where magic has ceased to exist, while Irina is still a place where it remains alive. And this happened because of a decision made by certain entities. Curious, she asks what kind of entities those would be. Simon replies that if he were to name them, he would start with the dragon that guards the border between the 2 lands. He continues by saying that there is also the Ancient, the one who has taken root in the center of the earth, the Great Witch of the North, the Saint of Verdure, and finally the Castle of Thorns. She feels confused trying to absorb everything, and Simon comments that the entire decision was made by these transcendent beings who influence the fate of the lands. It can be presumed that the transcendent of the central continent rejected the use of magic. That is why a strict prohibition was imposed, extending to the border. That is why humans can come and go between the 2 lands, while magic cannot. Lacey comments that Khalid must be very amazing, since even with the ban, he managed to keep his Teru active in the central continent. Simon excitedly confirms, saying yes, and that Prince Khalid's tiger is not an ordinary tiger. Lacey retorts by asking how a tiger could be considered ordinary. Mentally, she complains, asking why the hell Khalid didn't tell her that he could unsummon his Teru. He should have warned her since she spent all this time terrified of the creature. She remembers discovering that Khalid has his magic linked to the element of wind, which, in her opinion, is a bit surprising since he would fit much better with the element of earth. Because he is someone much more intense, warm, and imposing, like a golden desert blazing under the afternoon sun. Simon watches her for a few minutes, then comments that he is happy to see Her Highness enjoying her time on the ship's deck. It's a shame they had to wait to cross the border to use this type of magic. From what I understand, they use magic to project the vision and sensations of the outside inside the ship. She comments that the environment is much more pleasant now, since there wasn't even a window before. Simon explains that various magical spells have been cast on the ship, making it practically a large magical device. Simon explains that the balcony cannot be seen from the outside, so he asks her to feel at ease. She smiles confidently, thinking that nothing surprises her anymore and that all this knowledge has made her stronger. Simon prepares to finish the studies for today, but Lacey says she has one last question she would like to ask before concluding. She then asks if it is really okay for a foreigner without magic and without a Teru to marry Khalid. After all, he is the great prince of Arena. He then says that she also possesses magic, and Lacey seems confused by this statement. He explains that she is not aware of it, as she was born and raised on the other side of the border. But it is undeniable that she possesses magic. An extremely powerful magic, connected to the element of water. I am curious to learn more about our protagonist's powers. Still in disbelief, she tries to argue, saying that it is probably just something he wants to believe. Simon, however, calmly responds that he understands it may be difficult for her to comprehend this fact. But it is essential that she accepts this truth from now on, as she is still not able to control her magic properly. He continues explaining that even her kind words carry power. However, this power can also end up harming her. But fortunately, her emotions are stable, and she tends to remain calm most of the time. He explains that using magic excessively can cause exhaustion since mana is deeply linked to emotions. Even good intentions can generate blessings or condemnations depending on how they are manifested. Lacey, thoughtful, says she will take care and always keep Simon's words in mind. Then she asks how she can learn to shape her mana into a teru. Simon replies that normally people learn this while they are still young, spending time with their families. But then he stops responding and becomes thoughtful. And Lacey is left wondering why the sudden pause. Then out of nowhere, he starts talking again, saying that it would be ideal if Prince Khalid helped her in this process. She, curious, asks if she couldn't do that with him instead. He blushes, immediately denies, saying in a trembling voice that this is impossible, as this type of learning usually involves physical contact. Still a bit embarrassed, he adds that she and Prince Khalid have a strong synastry. Thoughtful, she seems to understand why Simon mentioned family and thinks it makes sense, as her situation is somewhat special. Despite not knowing or having memories of her father, she remembers her mother well. Despite the difficult life, her mother was always a loving and affectionate woman. However, she realizes that when she remembers those moments, she never felt anything special when she hugged or kissed her. Lacey argues that she was born in Weldon, and that, as he himself had said, the magic ceased to exist there a long time ago. Simon, however, explains that there were still Iranians who were forced to cross the border, taking their magical heritage with them. She becomes thoughtful, understanding that he is suggesting her parents or ancestors are from Irina. Lacey then concludes, thoughtfully, that Khalid is the only person who can help her at that moment. Simon agrees with a slight nod. Lacey asks if the elements of water and wind usually have a good synastry. Simon begins to explain that it's not exactly for that reason, and that, in fact, there is a special synastry between her and Prince Khalid. But before he can finish, a loud sound of something breaking interrupts their conversation, causing them to turn startled in the direction of the noise. We then see that Lana and another guard have apparently accidentally destroyed the door to the room, and she is on top of the other guard while he pleads for help. Realizing what she has just done, she quickly gets up and then bends towards Lacey, apologizing for scaring and disturbing Her Majesty. Clearly irritated, Simon asks Lacey how they should deal with the situation, then suggests that they should dunk Lana in the ocean or maybe tie her upside down to the mast. One option would also be to force her to spend a night inside a wooden barrel. And poor Lana trembles, awaiting her punishment. Lacey sighs. To be honest, she thinks a punishment is unnecessary in this situation. All this confusion makes her remember something. The necklace she is wearing is actually a magical translation item. And because of the ban, it was only activated when the ship crossed the border. Because of this, she was able to understand the song sung during the ceremony, but she didn't imagine he would interpret swear words as well. We return to about 10 minutes ago, outside the room where Lacey and Simon are. We see Lana running down the hallway, shouting furiously, "Where do you think you're going, you bastards? You filthy rats!" She chases two guards who flee in terror. It seems her investigation got a bit out of control. She finally corners them and jumps on top of them, but so intensely that she ends up destroying the door to Lacey's room. Returning to the present, Lacey chuckles softly. Seeing someone with such a dirty mouth cowering in fear of punishment is something that, deep down, awakens in her a slight feeling of pity. But still, she has to admit, it's somewhat funny. But then she notices something strange about Lana. Flames are coming from her shoulders, and curiously she asks if that is Lana's teru. Lana remains silent, probably still embarrassed by the commotion her investigation caused. Simon sighs, scolding Lana and saying she should answer since Her Majesty asked her a question. Looking at the ground, Lana confirms that yes, that is her teru. Lana clenches her fists, irritated with herself, thinking about how disrespectful it was to show Her Majesty such a weak and unstable teru as hers. Simon clears his throat and begins to say that while they decide Lana's punishment, she can wait. His speech is interrupted by Lacey, who approaches Lana, kneels before the warrior, and comments on how beautiful her teru is, almost as if she has wings of fire. She brings her hand closer to the flames and mesmerized comments again on how beautiful the flames are. Lana looks at Lacey, clearly touched by the words of the consort princess. Coming face to face with our protagonist, smiling warmly at her. She is impressed. It's the first time she has the opportunity to see the princess up close. Lacey brings her face closer to the flames, commenting that she imagined it would be too hot, but to her surprise, it is pleasantly warm. She then addresses the woman, asking if she is one of Khalid's personal guards, and if so, how should she call her? But Lana just looks at her thoughtfully with tear-filled eyes, realizing that her mana hasn't been so stable for a long time. So this is the power of the consort princess. Concerned about the warrior's reaction, Lacey asks if everything is okay, and the two guards who were being chased by Lana are completely incredulous to see that she is crying. She wipes her tears and asks Lacey to just call her Lana, and humbly admits that she understands she still has much to improve. She then says that she would like to serve the princess as a knight. Simon tries to explain, embarrassed, that in Arena the term knight is not used, and that Lana probably doesn't know what she's saying. But he is interrupted before he finishes, when Lana holds Lacey's hands. And then she says that the role of a knight is to protect her highness at all costs and remain in her shadow. Nothing is more important than that. Simon is surprised, wondering how Lana knows about the duties of a gentleman. Determined, Lana pleads for the consort princess to allow her to protect her with her life. Simon tries to argue, reminding Lana of her position as head of the border patrol, but she simply ignores him, resolute in her decision. And somewhere on the ship, Luan seems to sense that his twin sister is up to something. On the upper deck, Khalid and Simon discuss the progress of the investigation, commenting that, unfortunately, nothing significant has been discovered during the interrogation of the guards. As they walk, Luan comments on how strange it is that there is no trace of magic or interference. Khalid explains that in this case, there are two possibilities. Either the prisoner was extremely cautious, or her accomplice is someone with exceptional skills. Luan then asks if they should start looking for who the accomplice is. Khalid replies that they should wait until they are sure they are safe from the mutants. He comments that the patrols have been reinforced since the incident with the spy. Unfortunately, there are still no signs of any threat. Even so, they must not let their guard down. Khalid states that they need to ensure there are no surprise attacks on the ship until they reach Arena. After all, the consort princess is on board. The scene cuts to an interior part of the boat. The three maids say they could not properly care for the princess until now, as they needed to keep her existence a secret. However, now that the ceremony is over, they can finally be by her side and serve her without restrictions. Lacey thanks them for all the effort they have made to make her more beautiful, but comments that unfortunately she has not had the opportunity to meet Prince Khalid recently. One of the women comments, annoyed, that it is unbelievable what they are making the prince work day and night in recent days. Another woman comments that someone should have a talk with Simon about this. Lacey, chuckling softly, replies that there must be a reason for it. After all, she knows how busy the prince can be. But the woman retorts incredulously that it has been days since the prince spent time with her highness. Lacey sighs, thinking that perhaps things were better when she couldn't understand them. She also wonders why the priestesses are personally taking care of her. She remembers a few days ago when they formally introduced themselves to Her Majesty. The woman with short copper-colored hair bowed before Lacey and said it was an honor to finally meet her, introducing herself as Ma, the water priestess. The young woman with long brown hair was named Zoot and was the fire priestess, while the young woman with black hair was named Ta and was the earth priestess. Lacey thinks she had imagined they were not just simple servants, but she never imagined they would be priestesses. She is even more surprised when Ma explains that in Weldon they would be called bishops, since in Weldon even nobles have difficulty meeting people like that. Ma tries to reassure her by explaining that despite being priestesses, they do not serve a god. They actually protect the sacred sanctuary of the four elements: water, fire, wind, and earth, and in return, they receive their blessings. Therefore, it does not matter how long the journey is. As long as the four priestesses are on board, they will be graced with good weather, calm seas, and sunny days. Lacey is impressed by the power of the priestesses. Then she notices that she has only met 3 priestesses and questions where the wind priestess is. Ma responds with a smile that Prince Khalid also has the role of High Priest of the Wind, and part of their role is to serve the High Priest, which is why they also took on the function of serving the consort princess. Lacey comments that there isn't much to do, after all. It must be difficult to see someone as busy as he is. Lacey then understands that this means Khalid participated in the ceremony as High Priest. It is no surprise that he doesn't have time. After all, he holds many responsibilities. The priestesses finish arranging Lacey, so Ma says they should go to the dining hall. Lacey questions whether it is really necessary for her to wear so many jewels and accessories to leave the room. The day is almost over, and she has barely seen the prince. Zod explains that the accessories are magical and help her adjust better, but concerned asks if they are making the princess uncomfortable. Lacey quickly responds that everything is fine and they are not uncomfortable. On the outside of the ship, Khalid is watching the sunset when his Zeppi approaches and asks why he is there, sitting alone with a scowling expression on his face. He adds that he had instructed Khalid to stay close to the princess and protect her. Khalid glances sideways at Zeppi and replies that those were his words. And with that, he asks what the tiger is doing there instead of being near the consort princess. Shrinking in size to sit closer to Khalid, Zeppi explains that the princess has such a strong water mana that he feels sleepy near her, and that Khalid should hurry up and do his job and help the princess wake up and control her magic. Khalid sighs and complains, "Enough of bothering me, old man." The tiger gets irritated, roaring in response. "What did you say?" "I told you not to call me that." Embarrassed, Khalid murmurs that they have already done the deed. Zeppi tells Khalid that clearly once was not enough and that he should hurry because they are approaching the continent. While the prince pets the tiger's head, the animal adds to his speech, stating that it will also be safer for Khalid when the princess's powers awaken. The prince begins to explain that he is trying his best. Only for some reason, he stops talking and freezes for a second. He senses something, quickly with a sharp look. He turns in the direction of the presence. A monstrous shadow emerges before him, letting out a threatening hiss. The creature shows its fangs to Khalid and then lunges towards the prince. Khalid reacts quickly, drawing his blade and slicing the creature with a precise strike. "A mutant!" Men shout from afar as the nearby sea and ship are stained by the fluids left from the creature. The guards run towards the deck, worried, asking if the prince is okay and if the creature injured him. Looking towards where the creature fell, Khalid asserts that he is fine, then simply orders the men to ensure that the creature does not return to the ship. The guards watch alarmed, and one of them shouts, indignant, wanting to know how the creature managed to get past the watch. Another quickly orders to reinforce security on the deck, as there may be more of them lurking. Zeppi comments that they must be closer to the continent than he imagined, since creatures like that are lurking. Khalid admits that he is not at his best, and Zeppi agrees, saying that it is not like him to allow an enemy to get so close. He then asks if he has been overexerting himself lately. The prince confesses that his thoughts have been elsewhere lately. Zeppi lightly scolds him, asking him to pull himself together and stay focused. He then adds that it would be extremely beneficial for the battles if the princess could help them with her magic. With a serious look, Khalid says that this will never happen, as he did not bring her there to transfer his burden to her. Meanwhile, inside the ship, Lacey is clearly irritated as she waits sitting for hours for Khalid to have dinner. Letting her insecurity speak louder and completely oblivious to what is happening outside the ship, she wonders if Khalid's distance is because he has already gotten what he wanted from her. She then realizes that the reason for her bad mood is that she misses the prince. A knock on the door pulls Lacey out of her thoughts. She goes to the door, hopeful that it is Khalid, even though he doesn't need to knock. But she finds Luan awkwardly standing in front of her door. He apologizes for the intrusion and informs her that he was ordered to keep her company. He adds that interacting with more people would also help her awaken her magic. Lacey smiles at Luan, saying that he arrived just in time as she was starting to get bored. Luan enters the room and then assumes a firm posture as if he were on guard. Lacey asks what he is still doing standing there and tells him to sit down. Luan, surprised, says that he would never dare. Pouting, Lacey says that Khalid probably won't show up to enjoy any of this. Luan begins to explain that the prince encountered a mutant earlier but then stops talking, realizing that explaining too much about certain things to the princess could bring him trouble later, as Khalid does not want her to worry. To disguise it, he gives in to Lacey's request and sits at the table, and starts to eat the meal enthusiastically. Lacey watches him with a smile on her face, commenting that they really do look quite alike, which is kind of obvious since they are twins, she adds. Luan comments that Lana must be giving the princess quite a headache. He stands up and bows to Lacey, apologizing on behalf of his sister, but the princess assures him that he doesn't have to worry, and that she likes how honest Lana is. She laughs a little, commenting that despite their physical resemblance, they both have very different personalities. Luan feels sad to hear this because Lacey just said she likes Lana's personality, which means she probably doesn't like his personality. Lacey argues with him, explaining that that's not what she meant when she commented about Lana. The two look at each other for a second and then start laughing at the situation. Some time passes, and when dessert time arrives, Lacey asks if Luan is also a gentleman, and he says that in a way, he is. Curious, Lacey asks why a gentleman like him is on such a long journey. Luan taps the spoon on the table, a bit uncomfortable with the subject he is about to discuss. He explains that he and Lana come from a very low social class. That's why when he and Lana were assigned to their roles, many people commented about them. Although they were well-trained, that doesn't change the fact that they were born of humble origins. The one who shouldered the responsibility for all the objections and doubts was none other than Prince Khalid. He explains that he boarded that ship to honor the prince's trust and repay his kindness. No matter what path the prince chooses to follow or what adventure he decides to face, he will always be ready to accompany him. Lacey seems to understand now why Luan is so strict with Lana. She then gives a discreet smile. Lacey reassures him, saying that there is no reason to worry. She states that the prince is an excellent judge of character and certainly sees both him and Lana as much more competent than many nobles by birth. Luan thanks the sincere words of the consort princess. He comments that there is one more reason why he boarded the ship. Luan begins to recount that there was a time of chaos in Arena when the slave trade was on the rise. And during that period, many children were sold in Weldon, and with that, he and Lana lost their younger sister. Lacey feels sad to hear about this, and she says she is very sorry for what happened to him and Lana. He continues, saying that for the last 2 years he has searched the entire empire for his sister, but has still not found any clues about her whereabouts. Even so, he believes that if fate allows, he should reunite with her at some point. The protagonist, observing Luan closely, asks if they have met before. Confused, he says that the first time they met was on the ship. She looks at him thoughtfully, commenting that he seems strangely familiar to her, and that she just didn't notice before because her mind was full of things. But now that things have calmed down, she has a feeling that she has seen him somewhere before. Simon suddenly arrives, redder than a pepper, apparently having overheard the end of the conversation, and reprimands the princess for her inappropriate behavior. Lacey ignores the man's outburst. In fact, she seems excited to see him since it's been a while since she last met him. But Simon is still processing what he just heard and asks if what she just said to Luan isn't a famous pickup line in Weldon to be used when flirting with someone. Lacey bursts out laughing and asks Simon to stop joking, asking where he learned that word. Simon, completely desperate, pleads that it can't be true, saying that flirting with someone other than the prince would be absurd. Luan spits out his drink in shock at what he just heard. Lacey explains to Simon that he misunderstood everything and that she wasn't flirting with anyone. But Luan, very embarrassed by the situation, thanks for the meal and runs out of there. And no matter how much Lacey tries to stop him, the man was extremely agile and fast. Massaging her temples, she reassures Simon that it was nothing like what he was thinking and asks him to explain the misunderstanding to Luan later. Pepe approaches the two, saying that now is not the time for this kind of thing. He says not to waste time as the princess's magic has to awaken soon, so they should stop wasting time on trivial matters when she and Khalid should be getting more physically intimate. Lacey is completely paralyzed, not understanding what is happening. She questions Simon if perhaps they can talk, while mentally freaking out about what she just heard. He smiles and says that it's not usually like this, but that Zeppi is an exception in this regard. He adds that this is just one more reason why Prince Khalid is so exceptional. Without any shame, Zeppi asks Lacey what the reason is that she and Khalid have been avoiding copulation. He gives her a light headbutt, saying that she needs to awaken the magic within her. Simon says that he can't hear what Zeppi is saying so clearly when she and the prince are together, so he asks her to tell him what the wheat is saying. Grumbling, Lacey says that Zeppi is saying she needs to hurry up and awaken her magical powers. Simon apologizes to the princess, feeling a bit bad for having literally asked her the same thing that Zeppi just asked her. Zeppi begins to withdraw after talking to Lacey. She comments that lately everyone has been insisting that she awaken her magic. Him, the priestesses, and now even that Teru. Curious and a bit irritated, she wants to know what exactly happens when two people share a strong synastry. She confesses that, to tell the truth, she has been feeling restless in recent days. Not seeing Khalid for so long has left her agitated and lost in thought. She pauses for a moment, thinking about how much she misses him. To disguise it, she adds that she has been quite worried about Khalid and sometimes even gets angry with him. She quietly asks if it's possible for synastry to create a bond between two people. Simon thinks about the question. But then Lana appears out of nowhere, stating that it is indeed possible. And she says this from her own experience since she has a strong connection with Luan, her twin brother. Still surprised by the sudden appearance of the warrior, Simon questions Lana about what she is doing there, and she responds silently with a slight smile. He explains that twins have a strong synastry between them, almost as if they compensate for each other's flaws. When Sana does something that would normally irritate anyone else, she simply lets it go. In the same way, even being quieter, the brother feels comfortable expressing what he thinks when he is with him. They feel extremely comfortable with each other, and Lacey becomes thoughtful. She reflects that she has never felt comfortable around anyone before, not even Madame, whom she has known for so long. There was someone close to her with whom she could never let her guard down. That's why she isn't very sure if she and Khalid have that kind of relationship, like Lana and Luan. Lacey questions whether synastry influences how people act and if it isn't uncomfortable to feel that way. She responds that she believes the connection between them will weaken if she continues training and honing her magic. Lana says that Luan has always been exemplary since childhood. She admits that she had to rely on him many times because of the problems she faced with her mana. And although her teru doesn't seem the best, she has improved a lot over the years. Lacey listens to all of this thoughtfully, with a slight smile on her lips. She sets her teacup down on the table, saying that she has decided she will do whatever it takes to awaken her magic as quickly as possible. Simon looks at Lacey as if he wants to say something, but he clenches his fist, holding back from saying anything. Determined, he knows he needs to bring Lacey and the prince closer together so that love can begin to blossom and bear fruit. Simon then asks Lacey how a relationship could be influenced solely by good synastry, and that naturally emotions also end up arising in the process. The protagonist says that he is right, but even so, she must be able to control her own powers and deal with her feelings alone. This way, she can become a useful consort princess for Khalid. Mentally, she recalls the words of the contract about not letting feelings interfere with her work. Don't do this, Lacey. You already know you are falling for Khalid. Don't confuse your feelings. Not understanding the real depth behind the princess's words, Lana stands up, clearly emotional about what she just heard, promising that from now on she will train harder to become a worthy knight for the consort princess. Lacey gives a radiant smile, saying that she is already very proud of Lana and fully trusts her. And Lacey's beauty and warmth leave Lana mesmerized for a moment. Lana wipes her tears and, determined, declares that no matter what they say, she will always be the princess's knight. Lacey can't help but see Lana as if she were a giant, fluffy dog. The woman then bows in front of Lacey when a voice says from the door of the room that it seems that her consort princess is very good at enchanting people. Khalid challenges Lana by looking her in the eye and rhetorically asking if she hadn't made the same promise to him. She retorts that now they are one entity, and therefore the situation is different, Your Highness. Then the prince scolds Lana, saying that he had asked them to stay by the princess's side to protect her and not to chat idly. He tells her she should leave now that she has finished speaking. Lacey is moved to learn that the twins came to her at Khalid's request. And Simon, taking the cue, leaves with Lana. A bit flushed, the princess comments that it seems like now it's just the two of them alone in that room. And Khalid says that this is normal since that is his room. The protagonist retorts that despite that, she has been the only one using that room in recent days. He calmly explains that is why he asked Simone and the twins to take care of her. He also mentions that he even informed the priestesses to be more attentive to her needs. Lacey gets irritated by how slow Khalid can be sometimes and thanks him sarcastically. The prince then says she doesn't need to worry because he won't take much of her time since he has to leave soon. Impulsively, Lacey complains about him having to leave so quickly again, which leaves him perplexed. They sit next to each other, and she says she understands the importance of what he does. But the priestesses are worried. They fear that the two will end up drifting apart. He then looks her in the eyes and asks if she is also worried about that and how she feels about him. Lacey quickly explains that her concern is because of the contract they both have. Khalid looks clearly disappointed that she is insisting on this contract talk again. She decides to change the subject and asks about Lana. He remembers and comments that it's true. Lana had sworn to be the princess's personal guard. He says it was already in his plans to assign someone to be her personal guard when they arrived in Arena, but he hadn't thought of Lana since she already has many responsibilities. Lacey understands the prince's point and comments that Lana really seems to be an incredible person, and in Weldon, female knights are quite rare. For women, besides rarely having the chance to wield weapons, becoming a knight means facing many difficulties throughout life. And because of that, she respects Lana a lot. She also comments that her teru seems to be quite powerful. Khalid is intrigued by Lacey's comment about Lana's teru. The princess says that Lana's teru reminds her of a phoenix, a legendary bird that dies by consuming itself in flames, only to be reborn from its own ashes. Lana's teru seems as strong as the wings of a phoenix. While explaining, she notices Khalid watching her with a smile in his eyes. and questions why he is looking at her that way. He replies that he finds it interesting because most people assume that Lana is weak due to her difficulty in controlling her magic. The protagonist feels a bit confused upon hearing this, commenting that, as the prince said, Lana has many responsibilities, which means he trusts her abilities. He nods but explains that normally people do not recognize her strength at first glance. Lacey remembers some of Lana's actions earlier, and then seems to understand now why the warrior spoke as she did. Worried, she asks Khalid if he thinks she was too reckless with her words in front of Lana. He smiles slightly and says they will have to wait and see, but acknowledges that she has always had a good instinct for judging people's character. She becomes curious about him using the word always and questions how long they have known each other, but Khalid just murmurs that he feels he has been waiting for a long time, and starts walking toward the door, making her question if she is leaving already. He turns to her and asks if she would like him to stay. Our protagonist's face turns completely red, but she does not answer the prince's question. Looking tenderly at the princess, he sighs, saying that she always seems upset when he leaves. He approaches, giving a gentle kiss on his beloved's forehead while commenting that it always makes it harder to leave her alone. He then says goodnight to his neri and leaves the room. She sighs, thinking that he probably won't take her to bed that night. She had planned to ask him for help with her magic, but now decides to leave the subject for another time. Sometime later on another day, Lacey is getting ready when the priestesses ask if perhaps she should try asking Lana or Simon for help to awaken her magic. Zoot and Ta comment that it would be better for Prince Khalid to help her since there is a limit to how much physical contact the princess can have with Lana and Simon. Ma then suggests increasing the princess's exposure to magic. In my opinion, Khalid is using the mutants and the investigation as an excuse to distance himself from Lacey, not because he doesn't love her, but I think he is afraid of how heavy the burden will be for Lacey when her magic awakens. The priestess explains that this is a method frequently used in Surev, the capital of Arena, to train children. By increasing children's exposure to various people and different types of magic, their own teru becomes clearer and their magic strengthens. One of them comments that this was the method Lana used. The other responds, worried, saying she doubts Lana would be happy to know that this was told to Her Highness. But the first insists that this doesn't change the fact that it is true. Lacey seems to think it's a good idea, but worries that her presence might end up disrupting others during their work. The scene cuts to Lacey gently placing her hand over Khalid's hand. She thanks him for bringing her to the deck, and he says it will be good for her to breathe some fresh air before they reach the continent. She asks again if she won't end up disrupting the work of others. The prince calmly tells her not to worry, that with the amount of magic cast on that ship, nothing will go wrong. And as long as he is around, no one will be distracted. Lacey asks if he will stay with her the whole time, and he says it's obvious, after all. Did she think he would leave her alone on the outer deck? Embarrassed, she comments that she thought he was too busy to spend time with her. He pulls her closer and says that he is indeed busy, but that this is where he should be. And with a slight smile, he says she will just join him, nothing more. Lacey then asks if he spent all the last days on the outer deck. He confirms and adds that he will stay on the outer deck until they reach the continent. She doesn't understand why. After all, he had said that the ship was safe thanks to all the magic embedded in it. He comments that maybe he should tell her now, since they are approaching land. Curious, she asks what exactly he means by that. Khalid begins to tell, but is interrupted by Zeppi, who approaches the two and starts growling. The prince crouches near his teru and says that it's okay, and it's time for her to know more. Lacey looks confused at the scene between the two, but before she can ask anything, one of the crew members shouts excitedly upon spotting the gorge. Soon after, another confirms, saying it's the Khazard Gorge. The consort princess looks at the horizon curiously. Khalid approaches her and explains that crossing the Khazard Gorge from the east side is the only way to reach the other side. Offering his hand to her, he invites her to watch the gorge together. The sun rises over Arena, a golden empire surrounded by desert. They walk side by side, illuminated by the warm morning light. Perhaps it was because the sun illuminated the mysterious empire of magic, but the golden glow emanating from there seemed to have something more. Something alive. Almost magical. Suddenly, the wind and fire rise in a whirlwind. Khalid pulls her to him, protecting her as the flames explode around them. Lacey coughs several times, breathless, trying to catch her breath while leaning against his chest, still surrounded by smoke and the heat of the flames. Khalid turns irritated, his voice laden with irony, asking if all of this isn't a bit much for a simple welcome reception. A green light dispels the flames, and Lacey is able to breathe normally again. Worried, Khalid asks if she got hurt and if she is okay, and she confirms that she is fine, It was just a scare. A hysterical laugh echoes through the air, immediately catching the attention of both. A man lands heavily on the ship's deck, making the wood tremble under his feet. The impact echoes loudly and makes the ship shake and sway. Quickly, Khalid holds Lacey so she doesn't fall with the rocking of the boat. The man walks slowly across the deck and says he sees that Khalid hasn't lost his touch. Then he comments that he thought he had died on the other side. The man smirks, displaying a confident and provocative look. Lacey recognizes the man immediately. That is Prince Khalif. Khalid scratches his head, a bit irritated, and asks Khalif if that was the right way to greet someone he thought was dead. Khalif laughs and responds by asking how he expected to be treated after 2 years without news. Khalid glares at him, irritated, and asks if he has any idea who else is on board that ship. Khalif smiles and begins to say that, obviously, he knew Khalid would block his way, but stops speaking upon noticing Lacey's presence and then observes her curiously. I thought it was cute how Lacey is hiding behind Khalid. Khalif leans towards her to take a closer look and comments that, apparently, Khalid had a good reason for not returning home. In a playful tone, he asks where he found that young lady. Khalid places his hand on the man's shoulder, saying that he knows very well where he has been all this time. The man is surprised to realize that Khalid brought her from the other side. He turns to the princess, apologizes for his rudeness, and asks if what Khalid said is true. Lacey confirms that Prince Khalid is telling the truth. Then she smiles elegantly and says he can call her Neris. She then comments that it is an honor to be welcomed by the renowned Red Wings as soon as they arrived in Arena. He smiles and says there is no need for such formality, asking her to call him simply Khalif, or better yet, Commander. We discover that the commander is actually named Khalif Atataz Kazek, also known as Red Wings, and he is Khalid's uncle. Khalif gives Khalid a strong pat on the back and complains, saying that if he had notified him earlier, he would have gathered all his soldiers and prepared a grand reception for her. Khalid responds sarcastically, saying that maybe if he had sent a messenger earlier, Khalif wouldn't have acted so recklessly. The uncle laughs loudly, finding it cute that his nephew is already doing everything to protect his beloved, and that it's a shame he is alone to witness such a scene. He should have brought Shakira with him. Hearing this, Khalid asks how his aunt is. Khalif replies that she is well, but has been careful since she got pregnant not long ago. Khalid comments that he remembers him saying the same before he left. It seems that Khalid's uncle really has a lot of energy. Khalif laughs heartily and says that was 2 years ago. She has already had another child, identical to him, adding that he hopes the next one looks like the mother this time. Lacey then remembers when she was studying about the nobility of Arena. She recalls being curious about Khalif, and Simon explained to her that Prince Khalif was Khalid's uncle, and that he and his wife were an incredibly affectionate couple, now with 6 children, and that he is responsible for Kazek, the lands to the east of Arena, including the Khazard Gorge. Lacey was curious about the fact that he is called by the title of prince, despite Khalid being the crown prince. But Simon explained that in Arena, all descendants of the royal family held the title of prince or princess, and that Surayev, located to the west of Arena, is the territory guarded by Prince Khalid. Kazek, the territory of Prince Khalif, lies on the eastern border of Arena and is protected by him, and the northern and southern borders are also guarded by imperial warriors. It is natural that the crown prince, the most powerful warrior of the imperial family, is responsible for protecting Surev, the land that needs a leader the most. It was thanks to his efforts that the most dangerous region of the empire became its most prosperous stronghold, because this region was once so dangerous. But Simon told her he would share more details about that another time. Returning to the present, Khalif extends his hands towards Lacey, commenting that he heard that people from the other side usually greet each other with a handshake. The princess knows that Prince Khalif is one of the most important figures in Arena, and even though she finds the greeting strange, she decides she needs to make a good impression. She then reaches her hand out to Khalif, but the moment she touches him, intense flames ignite. Startled, Lacey recoils as the flames spread rapidly up her arm. "What is this?" she exclaims, trying to understand what is happening. Khalid shouts his beloved's name and, without hesitation, grabs her arm engulfed in flames. He envelops her arm with a greenish light that pulses gently, and the flames gradually extinguish until they disappear completely. Simon watches the scene petrified while Zeppi growls. On the other side, Luan tries to hold Lana back as she desperately tries to go towards the princess. Khalid turns to Simon and orders him to examine the princess. Quickly, Simon obeys his prince's orders and begins to examine Lacey. Khalid goes towards Khalif and Lacey, worried, calls him by name. Khalif looks at his own hand, trying to understand something while Khalid watches him, filled with rage and hatred. Lacey, sensing the tension of the moment, calls out to Khalid again, worried because it is not like him to ignore her. Khalif then, as if he finally understood something, clenches his fist and starts to laugh loudly, saying that it is surprising she hasn't awakened. Simon reprimands him with visible irritation, while the man just laughs loudly, clearly enjoying the situation. Khalif apologizes, but admits to being impressed by what he has just witnessed. A soft glow emanates from Lacey's hand. She looks curiously at her hands, wondering if this is some small manifestation of her own magic. Meanwhile, Zeppi is destroying Khalif's cloak in anger over what he did, and the man tries to stop him, saying he has already apologized for his actions. He asks Khalid to tell Zeppi to stop, but the prince just watches coldly, clearly irritated by what his uncle did. Before things get worse, Lacey, who is observing the whole situation, calls for the commander. With a smile on her face, she extends her hand again towards the man, suggesting they finish the handshake. Khalif is surprised by the princess's approach and confidence. Worried, Simon calmly explains that Khalif's magic tends to be aggressive and unpredictable. With a tone of slight warning, he advises that, although courtesy is a virtue, she should avoid putting herself in unnecessary risky situations. Khalif looks at Simon and comments that he can hear him. Khalid touches Lacey's hand. With a tender look and a soft voice, he tells her that she doesn't need to force herself. She replies that she is not forcing herself. However, in her thoughts, she admits to herself that she just wants to get to know Khalif a little better, and to feel that strange sensation from when her magical fire touched his hand. Out loud, she says that he gave her good vibes in such a warm way that she just wants to return the kindness. Then she looks at Khalid with shining eyes and asks, "Please." Blushing a little, he allows it, saying that in this way it is impossible to say no to her. She turns excitedly and invites the commander for a handshake. As soon as their hands touch again, that sensation returns. But this time it is more intense, as if everything around her were on fire. It is hot, but at the same time it is not. Painful, but at the same time it doesn't hurt at all. Everything around her has changed. It is almost as if she has been teleported to another place. She looks around, trying to identify where she is, until the barriers begin to break the bubble that surrounds her. And suddenly Khalid grabs her, pulling her towards him, making her return from wherever she was. Lacey looks confused at Khalid. Then, the powerful sound of large wings cutting through the air resonates throughout the area, followed by a shrill caw that echoes across the sky, making everyone instinctively look up. Lacey looks in the direction of the sound and comes face to face with Khalif's Teru, the one who gave Khalif the nickname Red Wings. A majestic bird with scarlet plumage and fiery eyes appears in the sky, imposing and shining under the sunlight. And out of nowhere, Khalid starts to laugh. Leaving Lacey confused, she expected him to perhaps draw his sword. But laugh? Did he hit his head? With a beautiful smile, he looks at her and says that she is simply amazing. Khalif calms his Teru, saying that everything is fine. And with that, the bird calms down and flies towards the horizon. He analyzes the princess and comments on how impressive it is that a woman like Neris was on the other side all along, concluding that the world is much bigger than he imagined. Simon observes the scene with evident surprise, realizing what has just happened. The princess had countered Khalif's magic. The people around begin to whisper about the event, commenting that what the princess did was incredible, and that Prince Khalif's magic is strong, considered to be violet rank magic. She questions Khalid, confused, asking why people are saying that about her when it was he who did something. But Khalid simply extends his hand towards his beloved, pulling her face close to his and giving her a passionate kiss. Then, in a tender and emotional gesture, he begins to shower his beloved with small kisses, and finally he pulls Neris close to him, hugging her tightly, saying that it is hard for him to hold back. The poor protagonist turns redder than a bell pepper, not understanding what is happening and why Khalid did that in front of everyone. Khalif gets excited, commenting that he hasn't felt his blood boil with this kind of magic in a long time. And the princess exceeded his expectations. He asks her if she is afraid of him. Lacey replies that with Khalid by her side, she feels safe. But Khalif concludes that she was already confident in her own strength, which is why she wasn't intimidated by the power. Then he laughs loudly and mocks, saying it's hilarious for someone to have so much power even before awakening. Khalid provokes him, saying that he trembled all over after feeling her power. Irritated, Khalif responds that he wasn't trembling. He just got nervous for a moment. Khalid retorts that if that were true, his Teru wouldn't have come to him. This makes Lacey thoughtful and at the same time surprised by her own power. So it means that in some way she really counterattacked him. Realizing he clearly lost the argument, Khalif says he needs to leave because otherwise, Shakira, his wife, will get angry with him. He then gives Khalid a serious look and says he will have to restore order in the capital as soon as he disembarks. Khalid then says they left the sanctum in the care of his uncle. The commander then says that he will have no problem notifying him if something happens. He then jumps off the boat and mounts his Teru, flying home. Sometime later, the vessel finally arrives at the port of Kazakh, which means they have officially arrived in Irina. Everyone seems excited to be back in Irina after 2 long years away from home. A golden empire surrounded by desert. This is how Lacey imagined Irina, a place of extravagance and luxury. But now that she sees it in person, she realizes that the place is much more natural than luxurious. For some reason, she remembers the kiss Khalid gave her in front of everyone and feels all embarrassed, still not understanding why he did that. Simon's words come to her mind. Him saying how a relationship could be influenced just by good synastry. But naturally, emotions also arise in that process. She then looks at Khalid and wonders if feeling this whirlwind of emotions is a normal thing. When Khalid smiles, when he kisses her, when he acts unexpectedly and holds her hands, or when he treats her with affection or calls her Neri, she feels like her heart is going to jump out of her chest at any moment. But are these feelings normal? Are they her feelings, or is it all the fault of the synastry? He turns to Lacey and asks how she feels now that she is officially on Irinian soil. She starts to answer him, but then Simon approaches, interrupting the cute moment. He says he would like the two of them to return to the cabin because he has something he needs to tell them. In the cabin, Simon explains that it is still just a theory and he is not 100% sure. But he has reasons to believe that the consort princess may have entered the stage of magical formation. She is surprised to hear this and questions what he means, since he had previously said that she needed to awaken her magic first to form her Teru, and only then develop her powers. And that she hasn't even completed the first step yet? Simon says that normally this is how things evolve, but there are always exceptions to the rules. And that Prince Khalif deliberately stirred her magic using his own, by trying to find out who among the two was stronger. And this is a method often used by competitive warriors during disputes, and also by those who wish to make another kneel before them. She becomes furious upon realizing that he wanted to make her kneel before him. Khalid comments irritably that it was extremely rude of his uncle to do that, and that he would never have allowed it if she hadn't asked to shake his hand. Simon continues explaining that there are 2 ways to deal with this type of aggression: to conquer or to be conquered. She concludes that technically she ended up conquering him, even without intention. Simon says that if that wasn't done by her, then there is only one entity capable of controlling the magic in her place. Lacey asks if he is referring to her Teru, which would be strange since she hasn't seen any tiger or snake or anything that reminded her of a Teru. The advisor then comments that, even so, her Teru has been doing a great job so far. Lacey thinks a little about her Teru while playing with her hair. Simon adds that her Teru has blessed those who show goodwill and charity towards their mistress, and inhibiting and suppressing those that show they want to hurt her. Although he is not yet fully convinced, he begins to think that her problem may be that she cannot start the magical acquisition process. He claims that in fact what she lacks is just to complete the final phase. She reacts in surprise. Khalid, hearing this, comments that from what Simon said, she has practically completed all the steps except the first one. He then asks how she felt when she was attacked. She replies that she didn't think of it as an attack. It was more like being at the base of a volcano with lava flowing around her. At first, she says she was scared, but when she realized that it was all an illusion, she felt calm. Simon suddenly shouts excitedly, "Sensory sharing." He explains that what she saw was not a simple illusion. It was what her Teru was experiencing. He also says it must be extraordinarily powerful since she was able to feel everything so vividly. Very excited, he adds that if this spread, it would turn the academic world upside down. He leaves excited, saying he will research more about this. The two are left alone, looking at each other, still incredulous about what they just heard and Simon's excitement. Khalid strokes Lacey's head, saying he is surprised that she is even more amazing than he imagined, and that he is falling more and more in love with her. Embarrassed, she asks him to stop joking because there is no one around to see his performance. He asks why she thinks he is joking. He says that besides being stunning, she is absolutely incredible, and that it is natural for him to fall in love with her. She still feels the warmth of his words and looks at him, blushing slightly. He invites her to go outside again since she seems to have enjoyed the port of Kazakh quite a bit. She comments that she thought Kazakh was their destination. Khalid replies that no, they were just making a quick stop and would soon depart for Enon. Lacey comments that it's a shame because the place is beautiful. The prince smiles and suggests buying her something as a way to make up for the rushed departure. He tells her to choose anything she likes. Lacey looks astonished at the stalls selling gold jewelry in the streets. Even knowing that gold is common in that place, she still finds it impressive. Khalid tells her to be careful with her tone of voice since they are trying to be discreet and cannot draw attention. The good thing about him not having made public the fact that he chose his consort princess is that they can enjoy themselves in peace while they still can. He picks up a beautiful necklace from one of the stalls and asks what she thinks of that piece. Without a response, he looks around calling for Neri. He sees her squatting on the other side of the street, near a child. She observes the jewelry that the child claims to have made by herself and talks to her tenderly. Khalid smiles, surprised by this new facet of his beloved. She showed no interest in the rooms full of gold and sapphires. Lacey calls for Khalid, saying she chose her gift and wants to take that hairpin. She puts it in her hair and asks the prince if it looks good on her. Seeing her eyes light up because of such a simple ornament, blushing slightly, he thinks to himself that he doesn't know what to do with his own feelings, because it is difficult to ask her about the shadows that surround her. He approaches the child and pays for both hairpins, stating that he will take both. Then he turns and begins to walk in silence, speaking little, only asking what they should see next. Out of nowhere, he stops, turns back towards her, saying that their disguise has been discovered. Then he whispers in her ear, telling her that she should run as if there were no tomorrow as soon as he holds her hand. And he asks her not to look back, saying that there is no one as inconvenient as Lana. He adds in a serious tone that if they are caught, they won't be able to set sail that day. In the background, Lana appears, shouting, calling the prince, "Your Majesty," and Prince Khalid, clearly clueless. People begin to murmur and stir upon recognizing Khalid. The prince says now, and then pulls Lacey by the hand. Khalid takes a firm step and starts to run. He gives a beautiful smile while holding her hand tightly and runs through the crowd.